The story begins as one quiet evening. Breaking news broke in the city that disturbed the peace of the residents. The identity of a notorious swindler who had managed to defraud an entire country had been revealed, causing a public outcry. It turned out that the exposure of this swindler was due to a report from an anonymous source, and it was reported that about 30% of the country's population had been victimized. The financial losses from his scams were estimated at about 100 billion won, and it was not his first scam. Investigations revealed that this man has been involved in fraud since he was a child and is now hiding from the police, who have issued a wanted notice. Although the police have identified him, it has not yet been possible to apprehend the man, and it is also not known if he has a real name. The fraudster was found to be 35 years old and had never previously been listed on official databases. Further investigation revealed that his name is Han Jun-woo. Not far from the scene of the incident, Young-woo himself saw the news about himself and was shocked. Why did they use that ugly picture? Immersed in reflection, the man realized the futility of indignation and let the situation go. The memory took him back almost 30 years, to the moment when he was a little frightened boy, standing in front of an adult who demanded an explanation. The child, barely holding back tears, answered in a trembling voice that he knew nothing, had seen nothing, and had taken nothing. The man, who was looking for a valuable item, was alarmed and angry about what had happened and decided to leave the place as soon as possible. In panic, the man decided to flee when he realized that the situation was out of control. The events are transferred to the moment of the child's first meeting with the man, which took place in an elite kindergarten, where this bachelor came looking for a new victim, or rather his new woman. As he was breaking through the crowd, he accidentally bumped into a lady, nearly knocking over the wine glass she was holding. The man immediately apologized for his clumsiness, at the same time stealthily snatching a valuable ring from her finger. The lady only smiled and assured him that everything was fine, the glass was intact, and she was not hurt. She seemed reassured, accepting his apology, and said there was no reason to worry. To this, the man only nodded and stepped back, in his head thinking about how cleverly he had nicked the ring. Looking at his loot, he confidently headed towards the hideout with the stolen ring. But as he ran, the ring suddenly slipped from his hand. It bounced twice on the floor, slipped a little farther, rolled and stopped right in front of the child. The man froze, watching the ring roll towards the boy, returning to the previous scene, and as the man gets closer, he remembers that he saw the ring right next to the boy. The child, frightened by what was happening, burst into tears and begged to be let go, as if he really didn't know anything. But before people gathered at the child's cries, he hastily backed away, apologizing and citing a misunderstanding. As he stepped aside and continued to look for the ring, the man noticed another woman approach the boy and asked him affectionately why he was crying, and he wasn't even from their garden, which surprised the man. He turned around and watched, wondering with interest what would happen next. What did the woman say? The woman asked him if he was the father of the baby, and the thief got cold inside. He could barely squeeze out a response. He wanted to deny it, but immediately hesitated, afraid that he would give away his illegal presence in this place. He began to wonder if he should pretend to be the father of one of the children so as not to arouse suspicion. But suddenly, at that moment, a child shouted excitedly, "Daddy!" and hugged him tightly. The man froze in confusion and started shouting, demanding that the child let him go, claiming that he was nobody to him. But the boy clung to him even tighter, begging him not to leave him and promising never to ask for toys again. The people around him began to whisper, discussing with surprise and suspicion whether it was possible for someone to abandon a child in such a place. Trying not to arouse suspicion, the man laughed awkwardly, quickly picked the boy up in his arms and said he would buy whatever he wanted and hurriedly left with him. The scene switched to a sunset in the city. The view from the alley. A man was rushing with a child in his arms down a dark alley, breathing heavily from fatigue and exertion. He stopped abruptly and earnestly asked the boy who he really was, leaving him confused. He repeated the question as to why he had called him dad, to which the child calmly replied that he had lied, just as he had. The boy looked straight into the man's eyes and innocently said that he'd noticed the lie and had seen it with his own eyes. He then asked if the game was over, which only made the man more confused, and then stood up to his full height and asked the child what game he was talking about. The child smiled broadly and sincerely and said, "It was a very fun game," which stunned the man even more. He became more serious, asking the child where he lived and who his parents were. but the child calmly replied that he had no home or family. The man was shocked to realize that the child was a street kid and homeless, just like he himself had once been. He asked where the boy lived. The child explained that he could be anywhere. No one notices him. He just mixes with the other children and waits for his parents to pick up theirs. No one notices that no one comes for him. He continued with a sad smile, saying that people don't care as long as they're waiting for someone. Smiling again, he pulled something out of his pocket and proudly announced that he had won the game, which meant there was no need to hide it anymore. The man froze and waited to see what the kid would give out now. His eyes widened in shock when he saw the kid pull a shiny object out of his pocket. It was a ring he had stolen from a woman earlier and lost. The boy proudly held it up and said with a smile that he was now a winner. At that moment, the man remembered how the boy had cried and assured that he had seen nothing, and realized that he had been skillfully deceived. He was shocked and delighted at the same time, thinking to himself, this kid pretended to be innocent, broke into a kindergarten, and managed to fool Go-il-nam himself. The man thought for a moment, looking at the 5 or 6-year-old boy holding the ring he had once stolen and lost. The child's face lit up with an innocent smile, and the man wondered who he really was and how he had ended up in this place. He turned to the child with eyes full of amazement, which he noticed at once, and asked him suspiciously if he was afraid. The man suddenly felt anxious, not expecting to give such a reaction. He abruptly pulled himself together and thought, how so? Was there really fear on my face? And suddenly he realized he was afraid of this child, and his intelligence and his agility, and how he'd outplayed him at his own game. That was the tipping point. For the first time, the man felt the pressure of fear of a child who might be superior to him. He tried to control himself, and he smiled, strained, and reached out his hand, and said he wanted to take him with him, asking if he wanted to go with him. The child looked at him suspiciously, not knowing if he should trust this strange man, or if he would be tricked again. Despite his doubts, the boy still took his hand, which was a surprise even to him. At that moment, he felt something strange, as if something new had come into his life, a sense of family. He looked into the face of Go-il-nam, who was looking at him with a smile. It was our protagonist's first father, though at the time, the boy didn't yet realize what that really meant. But he felt something else too, something inexplicable that he couldn't yet comprehend. When he began to sense that he might have more than one dad, 3 more men, 3 more fathers, appeared from the past. As time passed, they all watched a TV program together, where a little boy asked a passerby for help, saying he needed to support his mom and little brother. And that's when Mr. Go-il-nam intervened, pointed to the screen and told the child that they were playing the very game he loved so much, and added that it's all just a trick, an actor's game. At this point, one of the men suddenly became thoughtful and began to look at the child intently. During their dinner together, he suggested that the boy try to play the same role as the child on the screen, which surprised Go-il-nam, but the child was excited and said he could do it. When the child happily agreed, the man felt both proud and scared at the same time. This boy still held many surprises. Later one day, a passerby was looking up at the sky, but suddenly someone called out to him, and he saw a child with tears in his eyes from inner pain and disappointment. The man felt pain looking at the child who was crying bitterly, asking him for money. As time passed, the child began to feel proud of the moment he had managed to deceive the man. When he met one of the other men again, he happily told how easily he had fooled that one, and eagerly asked when the next time would be. The man looked at him confused, already knowing what part the boy would play now. From that moment on, the child began to actively participate in scams together with the men, whom he began to consider his fathers. Every operation he took part in was a complete success, giving him a sense of triumph, and no shame for his actions. In time, he began to plan the schemes himself, controlling every detail and the course of events. He took a secret pleasure in the fact that no one could uncover his lies or tricks. He controlled the people around him with his wits, and an innocent mask he wore with skill. At such moments, it seemed to him that he had the whole world in his hands. In time, the boy ceased to be just a part of the family. He became an indispensable member of the rogue gang, feeling stability and true acceptance among them. But then, at one of their gatherings, there was a loud scream that filled the room with alarm. A young man, in whom the same boy was easily recognizable, jumped up and began shouting furiously at his fathers, accusing them of getting involved with the wrong people. One of the men tried to justify himself in a panic, saying he didn't expect things to go this far. 100 billion won, he couldn't refuse. The other began desperately pleading with the young man, calling him a genius and asking him to find a way out of the current chaos. Jung-woo only responded with despair and anger, saying that there was no way out and there was no way to save himself. The man kept begging him to change his mind, asking him to try to find some solution. But Jung-woo was adamant. Everything had to stop now or the end would be disastrous. Everyone panicked and started begging him to stay, reminding him that he was like a son to them, asking if he was going to leave them. Jung-woo was deeply hurt by what was happening, but suddenly he felt someone's hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him down. Turning around, he saw a smiling Ko Il-nam, who calmly said that perhaps it was time for them all to retire. The young man was touched to the core, especially noticing the old man's trembling hands. Inwardly, he felt that if he got caught this time, it would be the end of him, because deep down he was tired of the life of a con man. He began to remember how it all began, without noticing how he had ended up on this path, and how painful it was to realize it now. Once in prison, a strong feeling of regret came over him every day in his cell. This feeling grew from within, becoming stronger than anything he had ever experienced. Jung-woo sat alone in his cell, exhausted and filled with despair. He began to remember how the men he thought of as fathers were obsessed with greed, constantly living in fear and hiding. Now, exhausted and weary, he clearly realized that this was the inevitable end. Suddenly, he heard a loud voice, "Son!" which made him flinch, and he quickly turned around, trying to figure out what was going on. He looked towards the source of the voice with worry and fear, but suddenly saw one of those men in front of him. Jun-woo was extremely shocked, looking at the man standing in front of him in utter bewilderment. "What is this?" he thought. At that moment, he looked at the table and saw Ko Il-nam, who informed him with a happy smile that his father had achieved impressive results, and cheerfully pointed to the large piece of chicken in his hands. Jung-woo stared at him in amazement and confusion, wondering if this man was really his father. Ko Il-nam continued to laugh with great delight, proudly proclaiming his success in keeping that piece of chicken, considering it a great accomplishment. Jung-woo looked at the man in front of him in utter bewilderment. He then turned to Jun-woo, asking him to eat quickly, as he was about to go to high school soon and needed to eat well. Jung-woo was incredibly surprised by the man's words and began to question if he was really going to be a high school student. The scene changes, and in another room, one of the men was explaining the plan on the blackboard, saying that they would disguise themselves as gangsters at Sonu High to run a scam. The man continued to go into the details of the plan, noting Jung-woo would play a key role in the operation after class was over. Meanwhile, Jung-woo sat quietly and listened to the explanation in complete silence and stillness. His hands were folded and his eyes were full of deep thoughts about the plans and deceptions he had heard. Suddenly, the man abruptly cut him off with anger, asking if he was even paying attention or if he had blacked out again. Jun-woo focused on the board again and wondered if this was the same operation from about 20 years ago. He calmly and confidently said that this time, his main target would be the headmaster. They decided to first meet the principal at the Incheon Hotel to gain his trust and establish a good relationship. Then the plan was to get the principal to sign a fake contract after all, then convince him to go to a place where the gangster-clad accomplices will be waiting. He will want to cancel the contract because of the connection with the gangsters, and here they will demand money for the commission for the termination of the contract. With this plan, he impressed everyone in the room. He's a real criminal genius. June left the room saying he didn't seem to have an important role here, which shocked the people in the room, who were wondering how he knew such specific details that hadn't even been decided yet. One of the men mockingly commented on the situation, saying that he thought Jung-woo was going through teenage angst, but had apparently regained his energy. The other man then added with a sly chuckle that Jun-woo was the kind of person who got excited as soon as a new opportunity presented itself. Back in the room he had just left, someone asked what had happened to the previous mission, and if it had been successful, and someone else replied that it had ended a long time ago. At this moment, Jun-woo was listening to them intently from behind the door. He made a quiet sound, expressing his annoyance at what he heard before leaving the place. He entered the bathroom, feeling heavily burdened, and took a deep breath, reflecting his fatigue from the situation. He washed his hands and face and began to think deeply that what he had heard was indeed an operation they had conducted in the past. At this moment, Jun-woo was completely convinced that he was back in the past again. He stood there thinking about his 35 years of life, now realizing that he was experiencing a different reality back to his middle school years. The boy looked in the mirror and wondered if he was capable of changing his life. Then he told himself firmly that he would not allow himself to live the same life again. But as he was immersed in his thoughts, the door suddenly opened, and someone seriously called out his name, Han Junwoo, which made him turn around sharply, amazed and tense over what might happen next. The man entered the room and handed Junwoo a folder, calmly saying that it was a mission he would be completing next week. Jungwoo flipped through the pages and the man continued, explaining that this time his role would be big and important, and he should be able to handle it. The boy muttered in acknowledgement of the importance of the mission, but deep inside him, a feeling of uneasiness was brewing. The man warned Junwoo very seriously that this mission was also extremely dangerous, and he needed to be extremely careful this time. He firmly stated that none of their missions were without risk, and urged Jungwoo to stay alert. Jungwoo smiled to himself, thinking what he had assumed. Chang Junghwan had prepared a very thorough escape plan in case something went wrong. He looked at the list of people included in the escape plan: Chang Junghwan, Kim Kwang-soo, Lee Seok-jae, and Ko Il-nam. But he noticed that his name wasn't on the list. At that moment, Chung-jun asked him with a sly smile if he was suddenly scared of the mission. Jungwoo replied in a calm and confident tone, saying that Chang-jun had explained that this time the mission was completely dependent on his presence in the school because of the principal, and warned the guy not to show his face outside the school too often. He also firmly warned Jungwoo not to make unnecessary friendships, because only he and the rest of the group could accept him. Hearing these words, Jungwoo remembered the events of his past life, when he planned and executed scams with absolute precision, almost never failing. He remembered that the only reason some of his schemes had failed was because of the greed of the men he considered his fathers. Anger exploded inside Jungwoo. He felt that he had been brainwashed, that to them he was just a tool to make money. He remembered how he was constantly isolated from the outside world, spending time alone in front of the TV. In that moment, he realized why they tried so hard to keep him away from the world. They were afraid that his thoughts might change, and he would try to escape. However, there was one person among them who showed genuine concern for him, and advised him not to follow their path. But back then, Junwoo was not willing to heed his advice. Instead, he insisted on continuing his usual life of deception. He stubbornly shouted that he loved it and wouldn't give it up, accusing Ko Il-nam of not liking it because he wouldn't let him do what he wanted. At the time, Jungwoo didn't understand the true meaning of the words he was hearing, and ended up pulling away from the one person who was trying to protect him. In a past conversation, he remembered Ko Il-nam gently telling him that there were many other ways in life other than deception. When Jungwoo inquired about these other paths, the man suggested some common professions, like an office worker or a consultant, or maybe an actor. The man offered him the idea of becoming an actor and smiled warmly, proudly noting that Jungwoo had always loved acting, which Jungwoo himself had never seriously considered before. Ko Il-nam turned to Jungwoo with a gentle smile and called out to him quietly, then smilingly suggested that they go eat meat together because Jungwoo looked a little depressed. While they were eating, Ko Il-nam laughed and said that Jungwoo had finally started to like anchovy soup, even though he used to hate it passionately. He then smiled as he remembered how Jungwoo used to refuse to eat this dish. But Jungwoo didn't smile, and that made the man good-naturedly ask if he wanted to say something. After a few moments of silence, Jungwoo finally spoke up, calling him Dad, and Ko Il-nam replied with obvious anxiety. The guy looked at him with a smile, but with a mournful look, and seriously said that he wanted to die. The next morning, the students gathered in the schoolyard preparing for the trip, all lined up in 3 even rows. One of the teachers noticed that some of the older students were absent and began to complain about the low attendance. The teacher also grumbled about the bad weather on the first day of the trip. He then called out to Jungwoo, asking why he hadn't shown up yet. Jungwoo calmly and with slight irony replied that he was on his way. While they were standing there, another teacher came up to him, asked if all the second graders were in place, and reminded him to listen carefully to the arrival briefing. At this moment, Junwoo looked at his phone and saw a message from his father wishing him a good trip. He silently stared at the screen, touched by his father's simple words. Soon, the bus rushed to its destination, and the teacher urged everyone to get on faster due to time constraints. When they arrived, the place where they were staying was drenched in torrential rain and thick darkness, and a private room was waiting for them inside the building. One of the teachers complained about the noise the students made whenever they arrived. He opened the box and, with a sly smile, said that the contents completely justified all the noise. The teacher pulled bottles of alcohol out of the box and grinned, commenting on the curiosity of the boys wanting to try such a thing. He grinned wickedly to himself, planning to have a drink with his other co-workers. But suddenly the door swung open abruptly and unexpectedly. The teacher turned around, shocked, wondering who could have broken in so rudely. An infuriated student entered, shouting at the teacher and stating that he was deeply offended by his inappropriate behavior. The teacher, jumping up in anger, began scolding the student and asking who he was to dare raise his voice at the teacher. Junwoo paid no attention to the teacher's words, walking away and complaining about the loud commotion. He decided to take a quick nap somewhere away from the other students and told the teacher to leave the room. The teacher became enraged at the student's disrespect and yelled, demanding his name and class. He then rushed to the student, grabbed him by the collar in anger, and threatened to hit him before calling the classroom teacher. At this point, the student smirked derisively, ready for whatever might happen next. The teacher furiously pounced on Junwoo, swearing and trying to punch him. But Junwoo blocked the punch with such fury that everything flew out of his hands. The teacher was surprised and backed off a bit when Junwoo mockingly reminded him of his intention to summon the classroom teacher. The teacher became visibly nervous and embarrassed, while Junwoo doubted any of the teachers would come to his aid. He sarcastically added that teachers had recently been beaten up by his father and uncles, then showed the tattoo to the teacher. At this moment, the teacher was overcome with panic and amazement at hearing from Junwoo, who coldly challenged him. The teacher wondered in horror who this student really was. This guy with the tattoo. Is his family really related to gangs? Junwoo smirked mockingly, completely unfazed by the teacher's threats. He confidently and calmly sat down on the couch, ordering the teacher to leave the room and call the classroom teacher if he wanted to. The teacher felt angry and humiliated by Junwoo's insolence, stated that he would call the classroom teacher right away, and ordered him to wait. He rushed out of the room, yelling for Junwoo to stay put and slammed the door behind him. Left alone, Junwoo sarcastically exhaled a sarcastic sigh of relief that things had gone much easier than he had expected. He calmly looked around the room, completely in control of the situation. A mysterious mocking smile played on his face. Reflecting the success of his plan, he turned to the bottles and drinks the teacher had left behind. Meanwhile, the teacher returned with the class teacher, who at first said that it was very strange. Junwoo was always such a quiet student in class. Then he asked his colleague if what Junwoo said about his father, uncles, gangs, and tattoos could be true. The classroom teacher replied that if it was, they would have known about it beforehand. The teacher quickly returned to the room with his colleague, shouting, "Han Junwoo!" But when they entered, they saw that Junwoo had already disappeared, which only increased their confusion and anger. A teacher smelled the odor of alcohol and angrily asked his colleague if he had been drinking here. The other teacher nervously replied that he hadn't touched anything, but the first teacher insisted, pointing his finger at the bottles of alcohol on the table, and also the cigarettes scattered all over the table. The accused teacher tried to explain himself once more, but his colleague interrupted him with anger and irritation, saying he knew he hadn't been drinking. With rain pelting down outside their windows, the two teachers decided to look for Junwoo and find out where he had disappeared to. At that moment, Junwoo was walking quietly in the rain, away from where he lived. He headed towards a cliff by the sea under a gloomy sky and torrential downpour. He seemed determined as he stood on top of the high cliff, telling himself that the play he had prepared was now truly over. Standing on the edge of the cliff in the pouring rain, he thought that this moment was truly over. He stared at his shoes that were soaked to the skin, wondering why he felt so strange, even though his entire life up until now had been nothing but a lie. His life flashed before his eyes, and he remembered how he always thought he was the hero of the movie. But in reality, he was just a fraud and a criminal who deceived others. And he realized, if he continued like this, he would just repeat his life all over again. Deep inside, he decided that today he would end Han Junwoo's life of 35 years. He raised his head to the rain-covered sky and thought to himself, today is the perfect day to die. But suddenly, he heard shouts that he had been found and turned around in surprise. Several people quickly approached him and shouted, asking what he was doing in such a dangerous place. Junwoo coldly turned to them without answering. They shouted to him, begging him to go down immediately and warning him that the place was extremely dangerous. Junwoo ignored all the warnings, convinced that it was indeed time to end things. He took a small step forward, muttering to himself, "Sad, but it's time to do it. This is the chance to end everything." People rushed towards him, desperately trying to stop him from jumping, but his body was already hanging off the edge of the cliff as they watched in horror and shock. As he fell, his hand reached out as if trying to grasp a sliver of film, symbolizing the life he had lived as a criminal. The scene suddenly changed, and somewhere else there were angry voices about some of the performers, who had once again run away from a theater production, even though they had been paid extra because they had come from far away. The assistant worriedly approached the theater director, not knowing what to do, especially since the show was only 5 hours away. The director ordered that the audience be refunded their ticket money. The assistant angrily suggested demanding compensation this time, and criticized Director Ju, who constantly pays himself. Director Ju left the room, ordering to send a short and clear apology to the audience without long explanations. Inside, Ju was boiling with rage, remembering how he had always considered trust in his work as something priceless. He recalled his past when he had been a prominent member of the National Assembly just 5 years ago. He had achieved tremendous success, but realized too late that his success had brought about his demise, as many around him were taking advantage of him. Even those he trusted, betrayed, and constantly framed him in a ruthless game of political intrigue. Ju was left alone and isolated after he was slandered, accused of corruption. He then made the decision to completely withdraw from the political sphere, which had become too dirty in his eyes. After that, he took up his project with pride and passion. This project was the establishment of a small theater, but he soon realized that running such an institution was not easy either. Nevertheless, the theater was a good success at first. Although it was only a small rural theater, it managed to attract enough attention. The strategy of relying on new, unknown actors proved more successful than trying to invite celebrities who were hard to book for such a small venue. Ju clearly understood that the first thing that gets an audience's attention is an actor's famous name. But he was pretty sure that what really gives the performance quality is not the actor's fame, but how well he embodies his role. Sitting in the empty auditorium, Ju pondered the importance of sincere acting and how an actor can truly touch the hearts of the audience. That's why Director Ju decided to focus on aspiring actors who had talent but remained in the shadows. And indeed, the theater began to earn a good reputation as a place where new talent was discovered. But this reputation did not last long. Soon, young actors who had become better known began to move to Seoul, a city with more opportunities. Hungry for recognition, the actors left the small theater and went to work in Seoul's popular theaters. Ju asked himself in despair whether the problem was with him personally or with the world, since this was the 3rd time such a situation had happened. As he was walking toward the auditorium, suddenly he heard a sound from inside. He assumed that the assistant had left the doors open while talking to him and decided to go in to check the source of the noise. He cautiously peeked inside, expecting to see someone there. And indeed, just as he thought, he saw a young man sitting quietly in the back rows of the theater. This young man had been appearing here more and more often lately, and he looked like a high school student. But his clothes were a bit strange, more like a work uniform, and not at all appropriate for his age. Ju noticed that this young man always left some money after watching the performances. Ju sarcastically thought to himself that this small theater hardly has a regular audience. Perhaps this guy is the only loyal audience they have left. At that moment, the director entered the auditorium, approached the young man and asked his name. But the lad coldly replied that he had no name. The principal felt annoyed at such a dismissive answer and growled to himself that even dogs have names. He asked about his age again, noting that he looked like a schoolboy, and wondered why he wasn't studying. Junwan calmly and confidently replied that he was 17 years old, but he didn't go to school. He then politely apologized for being here without permission, explaining that he thought the principal's silence was a sign that he was allowed to watch. The principal was surprised by Young-woo's response and hesitantly said that he hadn't actually scolded him. At this moment, the guy quietly turned around to leave, but suddenly stopped as if he remembered something. Young-woo turned back to the principal and handed him the banknote, and said that he also enjoyed today's performance, although he was a little disappointed that it ended halfway through. The principal felt insulted and angry at the young man's gesture and shouted in anger at him that he had never asked him for money. The principal tried to grab the young man, scolding him for such behavior, but then he noticed something strange on the boy's wrist, and asked with obvious concern if he was being harmed. The guy quickly reassured him, telling him that he was fine, and that he would feel better after applying bandages and sleeping at home for a while. Junwoo quietly thanked Director Ju for his care and concern about his injury. The boy looked at Ju in silence, unsure of what to say at that moment. After a short, awkward pause, Junwoo quietly said that he was about to leave. But Ju quickly called out to him, stammering, asking if his interest was limited to plays, which made Youngwoo look surprised and curious. Ju tried to quickly explain what he meant by saying that there were more recordings and other scripts inside, but got confused and couldn't express his thought clearly. The director felt awkward, thinking he sounded suspicious, like he was trying to lure a child with candy, and exhaled with annoyance. Junwoo looked at him again, puzzled at his apparent indecision and nervousness. Trying to pull himself together, Ju calmly and sincerely asked if he needed any treatment. Junwoo hesitated for a moment and looked at him thoughtfully without giving a clear answer. Later in a small cafe, Director Ju said affectionately, looking at Youngwoo, that he thought he would ignore him until the very end. Noticing that Youngwoo was eating greedily, he smiled and said that he was obviously very hungry. Jungwoo replied slightly sadly that Director Ju reminded him of someone, so the director asked what he was doing now. Ju remarked that Youngwoo was still young and that he could easily find better jobs, to which the guy said that everyone has their own reasons. Jungwoo was quiet for a few moments, thinking about what he said. Then he noticed the piece of paper that Ju was holding and asked with interest what it was. Ju unfolded the paper with a smile and replied that it was just a new script he had just received. Junwoo's face showed curiosity when he saw the title of the script, Random Encounter, and Ju smiled, asking if he wanted to read it. Junwoo started reading the script with interest. It was the first time he had ever seen something like this. He flipped through the pages, reading the carefully written lines and muttering quietly to himself. Ju silently and carefully watched how Youngwoo reacted to what he read. When he noticed that Youngwoo was reading with great seriousness, he became anxious and worried about his reaction. Suddenly, Ju snatched the papers from Youngwoo's hands, emotionally saying that enough was enough. He nervously explained that the work hadn't been delivered yet, and he couldn't let him see everything. Inside, the director felt awkward, wondering what a country boy could possibly understand about a work like this. He was surprised at how easily he let him see the script, but he noticed that Junwoo was reading it with intense attention and interest. Jungwoo quietly said that he really enjoyed reading it, which made the director slightly disappointed at the simplicity of his response. Ju asked with a sarcastic smile if that was all he could say, then asked him to express his opinion about the script more clearly. Junwoo hesitantly replied that he really wasn't very sure, as Ju excitedly told him about how much effort he had put into it, explaining that it was literally perfect. Ju looked hopefully at Youngwoo, and then hesitantly asked if the reason he was so cold about the script was because it was a novel. Junwoo honestly and calmly replied that it wasn't that, but that he wasn't sure if the script was appropriate for this particular theater. Ju was puzzled by the answer and asked Jungwoo in confusion what he meant. Jungwoo answered clearly and directly that starting from the second line on the first page. Director Ju ahead and quickly grabbed the script to read the second line of the first page to verify Jungwoo's words. He read the script carefully and was visibly stunned. When Jungwoo started reading out the details describing the ideal type of character Ju Young had written in the script, he was utterly shocked. It only took 1 minute for this brief but surprisingly accurate description of the GG. Director Ju stared at Jungwoo with total admiration and amazement, not understanding how he was able to memorize everything with such incredible speed. Director Ju then asked again, with visible bewilderment, what this had to do with his theater. Junwoo clearly explained that the scene from the script required a wide space where people could walk and talk for about 30 sec, which is about 20 steps, whereas the width of the stage in his theater only allows for 13 steps. He added that the use of umbrellas in the stage would make the lighting ineffective, as the actors' faces would be in shadow all the time, reducing the dramatic effect of the main character's appearance. He suggested changing the location of the scene from a road near the school to a bus stop, so that the actors could stay in place logically without cutting down on dialogue. He also suggested a creative move to have the main character appear with an umbrella and then turn it toward the audience, hiding his face and adding a sense of mystery and suspense. Junwoo was silent for a moment and quietly said that in the end, the scene should look dramatic to the audience. Director Ju suddenly felt awkward, and Jungwoo said that maybe he should have nailed it, because it would take too much trouble to do it. But Director Ju, listening with intense interest, handed the script back to him and seriously asked if Jungwoo wanted to continue. Jungwoo didn't quite understand what he meant. Director Ju calmly explained that he wanted to hear more of his thoughts and feedback on the script. Junwoo then began to go over the rest of the script again with intense attention, without saying a word. turning page after page. Director Ju sat watching Young-woo and thought to himself that this young man has an extremely rare talent for directing. Young-woo's spontaneous and surprising remarks included detailed observations about the structure of the scene, the movement of the actors, and the viewing angles from the audience. He also gave precise explanations on the timing of light changes and color temperature needed to make scenes dramatic. Pereno even mentioned the ideal timing for pauses in dialogue and the number of breaths needed to achieve the intended effect. Director Ju realized at that moment that it would be difficult, even for a seasoned professional, to give such precise comments so quickly and clearly. He made sure that Young-woo managed to instantly refine the script with just a few words, to perfectly fit the peculiarities and limitations of his theater. Director Ju was silent for a moment, staring at the script that Young-woo was holding, deeply shocked by the young man's talent. Then, with obvious doubt, Director Ju finally asked, his voice slightly strained, how old he started studying directing and where he got his education, because he is almost a professional. Young-woo replied confusedly, asking what exactly he meant. The director said that GG obviously attends plays because he creates storyboards for productions. Director Ju curiously asked if the job Jun-woo is currently occupying has anything to do with storyboards. Jung-woo replied that, in fact, he had only recently seen a play here for the first time, which left Director Ju shocked. The guy explained that he originally wanted to see the movie, but since he couldn't find a movie theater in the city, he decided to go to the play. At that moment, Director Ju was surprised to remember that he had first seen this young man only 3 weeks ago. Director Ju was shocked, wondering how such a young man, barely school age, could understand all the nuances of the theater so quickly, in just 3 weeks. And theater is not just a simple game, as many people think. It's actually a complex art that combines drama, art design, music, lighting, directing, and many other arts that work in harmony. Yet this young man had internalized all these elements by reading the script only once. Director Ju was amazed to think that this young man had done single-handedly what would normally require a team of professionals. What amazed him even more was that this kid had only watched the performances for 3 weeks, and now he was just eating. Director Ju hesitantly asked if he was interested in trying to rework the dialogues as well. Then he seriously added that he would assume rewriting the script based on Young-woo's suggestions, and thought to himself that he wanted to see more of his ideas, not only on directing, but also on the main roles in the acting. Young-woo hesitated for a moment before answering. The guy said that he couldn't do it because he didn't know the actors. Director Ju smiled and said that it would depend on their skill level. Young-woo quietly interrupted, explaining that it wasn't about that. Young-woo explained that he needed to see a person's life in its entirety to notice subtle details like habits or expressions. He emphasized that without that information, he couldn't do it. Even the tone and timbre of voice plays a great deal. Director Ju wondered with amazement and disbelief how someone could think in such detail. After all, actors are not robots. But deep inside, he realized that he already knew this truth and was just trying to deny something astounding and almost unbelievable. Suddenly, Jun-woo advised Director Ju to look in the mirror later and smile. He explained that when Ju smiles, his pupils dilate slightly, and added with a grin that it would be perfect for the role of an assassin. Director Ju was shocked and dumbfounded by Jun-woo's words and asked in bewilderment what he meant. Jung-woo smiled slightly and quickly said that he was just joking, then stood up, ready to leave. At this moment, Director Ju felt a lack of words to describe this guy's directorial genius. Jung-woo looked at Director Ju and simply asked if he would go the same, which slightly embarrassed the director. Jun-woo then thanked Director Ju for the treat and quietly left the place. Left alone, Director Ju laughed quietly and muttered to himself in amazement that he was clearly hypnotized by the dialogue. Director Ju continued to ponder, wondering where this mysterious young man had come from, but decided to put the rest of his questions on hold, as he knew he would see him again tomorrow at the construction site. Suddenly, one of the men mockingly asked Jun-woo about who he even was. Jung-woo coldly replied that he had come to collect his money. The man responded with surprise and denial, asking if he had left any money with him at all. Jun-woo firmly confirmed that he had indeed left it with the man. He calmly added that when a man says "I'll pay later," it means he has to pay, namely 587,000 won. The man became furious and swore at Jun-woo, calling him a petty bastard, saying that he wouldn't pay him anything. Jun-woo again very calmly asked if he really wasn't going to pay him. The man angrily and sarcastically replied that of course he wouldn't. He didn't even have that kind of money. Jun-woo took a deep breath. The man realized that he wasn't going to get his money this time either. He remembered that he had given this man one last chance and had already forgiven twice to avoid problems. But the man kept making excuses, talking about hard times and saying that it was normal not to pay when there were too many workers. Jun-woo quietly and sadly thought that these people had no idea who they were really dealing with. He sadly wondered if they assumed that he couldn't do anything simply because he was young and didn't have a family. Jun-woo knew very well that this man was not only stealing money from him, but also from many other workers. Although he could easily turn the other workers against him, he quietly wondered where he would find a new job. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud voice shouting, "What the hell are you even doing?" And everyone turned toward the door in horror. Director Ju appeared in a rage, yelling at the foreman and asking if the workers were underpaid. A few hours earlier in the theater, an assistant had irritably inquired about someone's absence, perplexed as to why they hadn't shown up yet. While Director Ju was anxiously waiting for Jung-woo, who was late for his usual appearance, the same assistant suddenly asked where the 17-year-old boy might be at that time of day, and remarked that he should be at school. But Principal Ju intervened, saying that the boy did not go to school but was working at a construction site. Then the assistant wittily suggested, "Why doesn't he go to the construction site himself?" which caught Ju's eye. He concluded that, based on his own words, the boy was probably working there now. Suddenly, Ju rushed toward the door, ignoring his assistant's shout to stop and reminder of an important meeting. Ju hurried with quick steps, berating himself for not realizing it sooner. Making his way towards the construction site, he reached it, breathing heavily from his rapid running. He stopped for a breather, looking around and thinking, "Is this the site?" The director heard some voices coming from the outhouse. Now Ju approached cautiously and quietly opened the door. Suddenly, he burst into the room shouting furiously at the foreman for underpaying the workers, which shocked the two men inside the room with Jun-woo. The foreman turned around and sat down, gripped by fear, while Jung-woo looked at Ju in surprise, perplexed as to why he was here. The man began to stammer, claiming that outsiders were not allowed to enter. In a fit of rage, Ju lunged forward, called them bastards, and overturned the table in front of them, scattering papers all over the room. Meanwhile, Jung-woo stood perfectly still, showing no reaction, as if he had no interest in what was happening. Ju noticed Jung-woo's immobility and, angry, shouted at him, demanding an explanation as to why he was standing there doing nothing. And while the two workers could barely stand up after such a debacle, he immediately grabbed Jun-woo's arm and dragged him outside, scolding him for wasting time on such people. When they went out and returned to the theater, Director Ju remained in a rage, muttering curses and calling those men cursed. He then turned to Jung-woo, expressing deep amazement at how the latter was able to endure all of this without showing a single bit of anger or annoyance. He asked if Jung-woo was offended because he didn't get his money, and suggested that he report the men to the police so that they could be arrested. But Jung-woo calmly asked why Director Ju would do that for him. At that point, Ju explained in a firm, instructive tone that when an adult offers help, a young person should thank, not argue. At that moment, Ju noticed that Jung-woo clenched his fists, a clear sign of inner tension. He looked at Jung-woo seriously and bluntly said that he wanted him to stop doing this kind of work and only work with him in the theater. While saying this, Ju began to think back and counted how much money he had lost in the last month. Jung-woo noticed the sudden silence and, puzzled, asked why Ju had made him such an offer. After a short hesitation, Ju smiled softly and indirectly asked if it was better for Jung-woo to stay here and watch those plays he loved so much. But Jung-woo replied confusedly, wondering why Ju was so interested in him and why he was helping him since yesterday. Ju quickly shook his head negatively, explaining that it wasn't personal help, but just an employee to him. Jun-woo chuckled and sarcastically asked if Ju really had that much money to pay him. This question made Ju angry, and he sharply asked Jung-woo if he was afraid that he would cheat him. Jung-woo simply and clearly answered that yes, he was afraid, which made Ju even more angry. He became even more expressive and shrieked that he would pay Jun-woo's wages even if he had to work on the construction site himself. Then he was silent for a while, remembering what had happened the day before. At that moment, Ju remembered something of what Jung-woo had said and realized that he couldn't remember all the details of the conversation clearly. But even though he couldn't remember everything, the strong emotions he had felt then remained vivid in his memory. He firmly decided to himself that he would not let this talented young man waste his life. The lad must develop talent, Although he realized that keeping Jun-woo around might cost him more for now, he was determined to do so. Jung-woo remained silent, listening to Ju and showing no obvious reaction. Then he quietly asked Ju, remembering their previous conversation, whether part-time theater employees get a chance to see plays. The scene changed, and at sunset, Ju stood at the entrance to the theater, feeling a little tense because he was worried about Jung-woo. He was somewhat worried because Jung-woo had been out for too long. The director had waited for a long time, wondering why he was delayed, and was beginning to think that he was more meticulous than the director himself. It had already been 7 days since Jun-woo started working at the theater. 3 hours ago, Ju had asked Jun-woo to tidy up the basement, which was in a state of chaos, and simply instructed him to put everything to one side. Ju was confused with indignation since it had been so long, 3 hours, and he had already planned to have dinner with Jung-woo. Ju was still in shock. As he walked down the stairs, he kept repeating to himself that the assignment couldn't have taken more than an hour. He walked into the room, shouting angrily, intending to ask what was taking him so long. But when he saw the state of the room, he froze with surprise, and asked in amazement if Jung-woo had really done all this himself. Jun-woo calmly pointed at the bookshelf and said that it had just fallen over. Ju looked at the shelf where the theater scripts lay scattered on the floor and immediately imagined what could have happened. He imagined Jun-woo arranging the books when the shelf fell, scattering the scripts, but quickly noticed that the rest of the room was organized very neatly and precisely. The books were beautifully arranged, and even the flowers were on the table with great care. Puzzled, Ju asked what exactly Jun-woo was doing, and Jun-woo simply replied that he was just trying to read scripts. Even more surprised, Ju asked again why then the room was in such a mess if he was only reading scripts. Ju then noticed that Jung-woo was holding a Russian play, and curiously asked why he had chosen that particular script. Jung-woo very simply replied that he had already read every available Korean language script in the room, which completely stunned Ju. Jung-woo pointed to the neatly arranged shelves and said that all the books placed there were the ones he had already read. Director Ju was astonished by this, and asked incredulously if he had really read all those books. He asked again if that was why he was now reading the manuscript in Russian, and if Jung-woo understood anything about the Russian language. But Jung-woo quickly clarified that he was not referring to the Russian text itself, but the Russian-Korean dictionary on the shelf. He explained that he had only looked up the meanings of some words in the dictionary, which allowed him to grasp the general meaning. Director Ju experienced amazement, thinking about how Jung-woo was able to organize everything so precisely based on only a partial understanding of a few words. Director Ju froze as he looked at the script in Jun-woo's hands, and realized with awe the level of intelligence and skill of this extraordinary young man. Ju realized as he looked at the book Gigi was reading. He realized that it was the same play that he himself had studied many times in the past. He remembered that scene in the book where its main character had to express his anger before speaking by throwing objects around the room. And when Director Ju looked at the scattered props in the room again, he realized that it wasn't just a mess, but a thoughtful and precise arrangement. The watch, pen, and inkwell were on the floor, arranged in a way that reflected the character's emotions exactly as described in the script. Director Ju was amazed by this and wondered how Jun-woo was able to convey the character's emotions so accurately, even though he didn't even know the knowledge base of the theater. After a short pause, Director Ju directly asked Jung-woo what exactly he wanted to be. He then inquired why Jung-woo always kept quiet, even when a person like him was around, and tried to draw out his true dream from him. Jun-woo calmly replied that his only dream was to live the life he was living now. Director Ju was surprised, and pointing to the chaotic room, asked in annoyance what all this mess meant then. Jun-woo quietly replied that he was just preparing the scene before it started. Director Ju was surprised by his words and curiously asked, "A scene?" Then asked if Jung-woo intended to play. But Jung-woo didn't answer, and Director Ju realized that he hadn't actually given up on the idea. Then Director Ju smiled in amazement and said that he had always thought that Jung-woo was only interested in directing, but now he seemed to be interested in acting as well. He wondered if this was the real reason for Jung-woo's deep passion for theater all this time. Director Ju then advised Jung-woo that from what he had seen so far, Jung-woo would be more suited to be a director than an actor. But Jung-woo objected, explaining that the objects in the room were not randomly scattered, but each one has its own purpose, and even a meaning. Director Ju insisted, saying that a good actor can act anywhere, but theater is something else. Jun-woo replied confidently, That's why they have a stage. Director Ju asked, puzzled. What does theater have to do with acting? Youngwoo explained that everything on stage must be in harmony and unity, whether it's the actors, the props, or anything else. Director Ju asked in surprise if that meant that harmony was more important than the acting itself. Junwoo replied that that's part of it, but he wants the scene itself to be perfect. Then Junwoo stopped talking and was silent for a moment, looking at Director Ju. Suddenly he decided to show him in practice what he meant by saying that he had no choice but to demonstrate it, at which point Junwoo completely transformed into the character and performed the scene with precision and focus, impressing Director Ju. Director Ju froze in amazement as he watched Junwoo's stunning and unexpected performance. Finally, Junwoo got so deeply into the role that he put his hand to his head in shock, and Director Ju realized that he was truly a rare and exceptional talent, as evidenced by those expressions. At that moment, Director Ju clearly saw that the expression on his face reflected a person who had nothing left, a person who had reached the ultimate limits of despair. Director Ju watched carefully and immediately realized that the boy wasn't just babbling, he had something to surprise him. Amidst the theater props, Junwoo suddenly transformed into a completely different person. It was surprising that Junwoo's eyes turned red from burst capillaries, a physical reaction that couldn't have been accomplished simply by doing so. Director Jue wondered with amazement and awe whether it was really possible to sink so deeply into emotions in such a short time. In the middle of his speech, Junwoo cried out powerfully and emotionally, slamming his hands on the table and shouting, "What's the whole point of this?" Junwoo stood trembling on the table, clearly showing signs of extreme tension. He then began to move slowly, still shaking with stress and lethargy. Without noticing it, Junwoo lifted his foot and stepped on the clock on the floor, causing him to slip and lose his balance. Director Ju immediately noticed what was happening and shouted loudly to warn Youngwoo. Knowing that the room was filled with scattered objects, making it difficult to move, Youngwoo tried to stay on his feet and quickly grabbed the back of a chair to keep from falling. Then, after a moment of silence and stillness, he slowly sat back in his chair, showing clear signs of physical and emotional fatigue. Director Ju was silent, deeply moved by what he had seen. He realized that Junwoo's actions and fall were not a mistake or an accident, even the way he caught the chair. It looked completely natural. Director Ju also noticed that his body posture and the way he sat down reflected a person who was completely exhausted. His blank expression as he sat there conveyed the image of a person who had no strength left to stand up again. Director Ju felt inside that everything Junwoo said was completely true, and that every element in the room and in the performance was perfectly synchronized. When the scene ended, Junwoo said that the performance was now over. Then Director Ju clearly added that it couldn't go on like this. He immediately looked at Junwoo and seriously told him, "You need to get on stage as soon as possible." The scene changed, and now Junwoo began to think back on his past and realized that it had been 2 years since he had cut ties with his fathers. Finding a part-time job had become incredibly difficult because he didn't even have a passport. And while he could live comfortably if he wanted to, he promised himself he wouldn't go back to a life of fraud again. The days he spent working on construction sites gave him a certain satisfaction, but deep down inside he knew exactly what he dreamed of most. Principal Ju had said he wanted to be on stage, and now he was thinking about it. At that moment during the meal, someone told him that at his age, he should play outside and not work in places like that. One of the workers said that a theater had recently opened in a neighboring town and suggested he go there. Junwoo thought silently, pondering that word, theater. After a little delay, he decided to go there and see it. After a while, when he got there, he realized that it wasn't a movie, but a play, which at first made him a little disappointed. During the performance, he heard a man sitting in the middle of the auditorium sighing loudly, but he didn't really pay much attention to it. What he really cared about was the strange feeling that grew stronger as he watched the play. His initial disappointment that it wasn't a movie was quickly replaced by a deep, long-neglected touch and excitement. He discovered that the energy emanating from the actors in real time and in front of a live audience was completely different from the magic of a movie. At that moment, he felt for the first time a strong desire to be on that stage himself. From that day on, he started going to the theater every day right after work. His body moved on its own before his mind could make up its mind. Until one day, sitting there as usual, Director Ju suddenly asked him what his name was. When he didn't answer immediately, the principal firmly and insistently repeated the question, wanting to know his name. From then on, the man who at first seemed to be just a theater employee continued to take an interest in him, even offering to come in for treatment and leaving immediately. Junwoo thought that this man's interference was a bit intrusive, but not a bad thing. His manner of speaking was somewhat abrupt, but he was kind, and clearly not someone who was capable of harming others. One day, Director Ju grabbed Youngwoo by the arm and dragged him out of his workplace, telling him off and saying that he shouldn't waste his time on such people. Youngwoo was surprised and thought to himself in disbelief, "Are there still such people in the world?" Then he sadly said to himself that this person must have lived a hard life too. Back in the present, after another of Youngwoo's incredible performances, when Director Ju told him he couldn't go on like this, he looked Junwoo straight in the eyes and said with absolute seriousness, "You need to go on stage immediately." As Ju reflected on what had happened and Youngwoo set up the props and started the scene, he thought that he didn't expect much from his acting. He believed that emotions were born out of life experiences, and that no matter how talented Youngwoo was, he was still just a 17-year-old young man. However, Director Ju was quite aware of Junwoo's exceptional intelligence, but he also realized that it was quite different from innate artistic talent. But in that instant, Director Ju realized that his thinking had changed. His thinking and opinion about the protagonist was narrow and limited. He realized that the abilities that struck him in Youngwoo were only preparatory tools for acting. Youngwoo needed a real theater, not just a rehearsal room like this one. But Junwoo himself quietly said while he was preparing the props that he didn't want to go that far. Director Ju continued to convince Youngwoo, passionately assuring him that his talent was incredible and he could succeed. But Youngwoo calmly replied that he liked his life the way it was. As they were leaving the room, Youngwoo asked if all the scripts were stored in the rehearsal room, which made Director Ju wonder again if he really didn't want to act. He just couldn't believe that a man with such talent would give up the stage. Junwoo simply replied that he didn't want fame. Director Ju looked at him in disbelief, realizing that this young man fully understood his ability and talent. He reflected that Junwoo's attitude shows. He knows very well that as he begins his acting career, fame will be inevitable. However, Director Ju kept persuading him, saying that he can't give up after seeing such talent. He then told him with deep sympathy that he understood what Youngwoo had to go through in life, but said that he himself had gone through many hardships to get to where he is now. Director Ju exclaimed that he would take responsibility for whatever happens, urging him to live the life he wants to live. Junwoo laughed bitterly to himself upon hearing the word responsibility, wondering how someone who barely knew him for a month could take responsibility for his life. The guy sarcastically asked Director Ju if he would kill for it, and was shocked when Director Ju replied firmly and loudly that he was indeed willing. Director Ju then pounded his chest and asked for the third time if Youngwoo would play for him. After this exchange of words, Youngwoo stood backstage, dressed in his costume, wearing his usual stage clothes, ready to go on stage for the first time. He felt a slight excitement as he stood there, peeking behind the curtain at the audience. The audience had already taken their seats, waiting for the performance to begin, and the auditorium was completely filled. Junwoo stood behind the curtain, looking at the light flickering from the stage, pondering his feelings and understanding the old man's feelings for him. Director Ju sincerely wanted to make sure that Youngwoo's talent would not go to waste, and he was giving him a chance to show his gift. Jungwoo remembered how Director Ju had told him that he would take responsibility for him, and wondered why he couldn't say no then. Did he really want it so badly? The stage light slowly came on, and it was time for the performance. The curtain rose, and Youngwoo walked in front of the audience for the first time, standing confidently on the stage. From backstage, Director Ju watched the stage with focused attention and nervous anticipation. Director Ju smiled excitedly and said, "Now it has begun." Nearby, someone asked if it was the boy he had mentioned earlier, and Principal Ju proudly confirmed, "Yes, that's him." The assistant expressed concern, asking if Junwoo was actually ready, especially since he had only been preparing for 5 days. Ju realized in his own mind that it would be hard to learn, especially being a boy who had never learned the basics of theater. The other man corrected him, saying that Junwoo didn't have 5 days. He only had 12 hours. This stunned everyone. Director Ju began to explain to the other person, emphasizing that it had only been 12 hours since he had given Youngwoo the script. Youngwoo stood on the stage with impeccable composure, waiting for the right moment to begin. He slowly and confidently raised his hand towards the light coming from the stage. It was the first movement that started his performance. Now that he had lost it, Junwoo continued his performance in a deep voice, expressing his sadness, saying that the world had imprisoned him in darkness and silence. The audience whispered about the new actor. They were shocked by his skill, and in a voice full of emotion, he said that the moment he saw her for the first time, it felt as if time had stopped. Inwardly, he admitted that it was a feeling he had never experienced before. Junwoo continued in a powerful, emotional voice that the moment she took his hand and smiled at him was the moment of their first goodbye. The audience was already almost cheering from this wonderful play. With deep pain, Junwoo expressed his powerlessness by saying that there was nothing he could do, absolutely nothing at all. Then he suddenly stood up and started to move away from the chair, continuing, "They were living in two completely different worlds." He continued, kneeling down, talking about his suffering, the choices he had to make. She could never understand any of it. Then he raised his voice in great excitement, saying that she was everything to him. So how could she say such things to him? People in the audience were crying. The narration switched backstage. Backstage, an assistant asked Director Ju in amazement where he found such a monster. The director looked at his new actor and talked about how even with his breathing wrong, the entire audience was looking at him. He didn't just memorize the parts, he lived the life of the character, feeling all his suffering. His lines easily changed with each outburst of the character's emotions. If the character were on stage, he would behave the same way. Everyone in the theater wondered if he was really acting. At this moment, the actress playing the role of Ellie entered the stage. Junwoo noticed her and rushed over to her, exclaimed in deep concern, saying her name loudly. He quickly grabbed her and shouted, begging her not to leave. Junwoo looked into her eyes with deep sadness as she told him, "There is something I never told you before." The reason why she couldn't answer that day. And at that critical moment, the actress realized that she couldn't remember the next line she was supposed to say. She froze in place, confused, trying to remember the lines, but could only utter scraps of phrases. Backstage, Principal Ju realized what had happened and exclaimed with dismay that she had forgotten her lines. He explained to himself that this sometimes happens to new actors who have little stage experience. Director Ju regretted that she couldn't just ignore the missed line and continue the performance naturally without stopping. At this moment, Junwoo whispered to her, telling her not to continue. Junwoo immediately realized the awkward situation they were in and began to improvise. At this moment, his eyes filled with tears and his voice trembled slightly. Junwoo warmly hugged the actress on stage and continued to say his words in a voice full of sorrow. The curtain slowly closed, covering the emotional scene that Junwoo had shown. Meanwhile, the audience remained stunned in complete silence, as if under hypnosis. Suddenly, the theater exploded with loud, enthusiastic applause, signifying the success of the scene and the audience's complete acceptance of Jungwoo's performance. Backstage, Jungwoo stood next to the other actors in shocked silence, listening to the deafening applause from the audience. Junwoo and the actress stepped off the stage, feeling extremely relieved that the scene had gone smoothly. Director Ju watched them from backstage with a laugh of disbelief, amazed that such a stunning performance had been prepared in just 12 hours. Director Ju remembered how actors usually took a full 2 weeks to analyze their character and understand the script. He was absolutely amazed that Junwoo not only learned the script, but also managed to correct the mistake made by the actress. This moment was another confirmation of this young man's exceptional talent. Meanwhile, the team backstage was discussing with visible amazement the extremely enthusiastic reaction of the audience after the end of the first act. They wondered how a 17-year-old could have delivered such a high-quality, emotion-filled performance in such a short time. The director asked them if they had really noticed absolutely everything that Junwoo had done. He had changed the entire stage concept, chair placement, movement patterns, lighting design, and even color coordination. Upon hearing this, the assistant was surprised and admitted that he hadn't noticed it until just now. Director Ju honestly replied that he didn't understand most of it, but felt he had no choice but to trust him. After a moment of silence, Director Ju smiled quietly and confirmed one thing with certainty. That guy over there is more talented than anyone here. Junwoo sat in the dressing room, feeling a strange sensation that he couldn't pinpoint. He began to realize that this wasn't the first time he had performed on stage. He remembered his former life of fooling people and playing many different roles. He had never been unaware of his ability to act. He used to embody different personalities and performed them skillfully. He remembered using this talent to deceive and manipulate people in his past life, but this time was completely different. For the first time, he was receiving direct stares from the audience. They were not ordinary gazes. They were full of emotions, tears, and deep consonance. In this unique moment, he felt as if everyone, including himself, had been transported to another world for a few fleeting seconds. Junwoo realized that this second life of his was strange and unfamiliar to him. In his previous life, he had made the decision to die and even gave up his name, believing he could live like that. But now, sitting under the spotlight on the stage, he asked himself deeply, "Can I really do this now?" The scene changed, right after the end of the first performance. Director Ju excitedly rushed into the dressing room, loudly shouting out Youngwoo's name with obvious excitement. He ignored the actress who apologized for her mistake, stating that she suddenly became nervous. Placing his hand on Youngwoo's shoulder, he said with playful sarcasm and emotion that Gigi is a little tomboy, pretending not to care even though he has such a talent. Director Ju then teased him, going on stage soon and he hasn't read the script again yet. Joe started talking further about how GH must have been up to all this just for the role. Junwoo, feeling exhausted, replied that he didn't want to feel trapped between the lines. Director Ju looked at him perplexed and curiously asked, "What does that even mean?" At that moment, Director Ju thought to himself, surprisingly, he had heard such a thing before. He remembered that an experienced actor had claimed that preparation meant keeping the image of a character in one's heart. The man also remembered the warning that prolonged reference to the text of a script unwittingly binds the actor to it. He recalled the famous actress's opinion that when a character's emotions are truly felt, the lines emerge on their own. He realized that for the sake of keeping things natural, she avoided looking at the script while filming. Director Ju smiled quietly, conscious that he had once thought this advice was overly pompous, and it was based on more than 20 years of experience. He marveled that such profound thoughts were coming from a young man who was on stage for the first time and had completed his debut act. Joe noted that the depth of each of Youngwoo's statements was so palpable that it was impossible to ignore. He noticed that despite not knowing many basics, the young man still had a keen sense of humor. After a moment's reflection, Ju realized that Youngwoo had already surpassed himself as a director, which made him a little confused and unsure of how to proceed. Suddenly, one of the troupe members entered the room and announced the immediate start of the second act. Youngwoo got up and headed towards the stage, and explained to Director Ju the reason for his departure. He promised to return soon, accompanying his words with a calm and reassuring smile. He then returned to the stage and continued to perform the rest of the play. His playing shone with renewed vigor, once again impressing everyone present. When the performance was over, the entire cast, along with Youngwoo, stood in front of the audience, receiving well-deserved applause for their outstanding performance. Among the audience was a man who was confident in himself and realized that he had finally found what he had been striving for all his life. The day after the performance, Youngwoo was alone in the rehearsal room, completely immersed in reading theater literature and scripts. Absorbed in the books, he suddenly heard a question about whether he was going to spend his life staring at the pages. The muffled voice belonged to Director Ju, who had entered the room and was clearly concerned. Then a time-tested box of books appeared in front of him, and a suggestion to confine himself to them in his work. Junwoo reacted with a surprised look at the unexpectedly brought books. The principal supported him, noting that although these books were not entertaining, they would prove useful, and that he had not changed books for a long time. At that moment, the young man remembered that there was only one library in the provincial town. He realized that the library was located far away from the theater. Junwoo guessed that Director Ju had gone there specifically for him in this heat, and recognized that his line the day before might have hurt him. As Junwoo leafed through the pages, the director watched him from afar, noting his deep concentration. Ju wondered whether the young man should study theoretical works, or whether it was better to limit himself to his natural talent. He soon came to the conclusion that it was within his power to do just that, introduce Junwoo to reading and writing. As the young man continued reading, he quietly remarked that he found the material interesting. The principal approached him and asked if the books had helped him even a little. Junwoo admitted that this was the first time he had encountered such topics, and found them more fascinating than he had expected. Ju was surprised by this answer, and could not believe that this was really the young man's first experience with these issues. He wondered with bewilderment how a man with no prior training was able to show such a performance on stage. To this, Youngwoo clarified that actors are not the only ones who can perform excellently. The director did not understand what was meant, and asked about the meaning of what was said. He warned the young man about the possible risks for those who act rashly and openly. He again clarified the meaning of the previous statement and listened to the explanation that the director always rushes into things without preparation. Ju's reaction was confused, and he asked when he had ever had to act in such a way. Young-woo proclaimed that this was exactly the case. He calmly explained that the director, helping him without knowing anything about him, was doing the same thing. There was momentary silence in the room, as the young man looked intently at Ju. He then decided to put the book aside and inquired if the principal was aiming to make him famous. To this, the principal replied that it was not at all necessary. John added that he only wanted the young man to do what he really wanted to do. He admitted with a slight sadness that he himself had been looking for such an understanding for a very long time. Junwoo listened intently while the headmaster awkwardly admitted that he might have thought about trying to use. However, Ju assured that even if he failed on stage, he would still go to the library for the books. Ju smiled softly and assured him that he would never doubt his intentions, and if he had thought so, he would have used all of the theater's resources long ago. He expressed his sincere gratitude for the books, recognizing that he really needed them. The director clarified in surprise whether he really felt that way, and received a quiet confirmation. The guy smiled and talked about how he would definitely repay him later. At that moment, the principal's name was called behind their backs. He turned around, surprised by the sound, and trying to recognize the voice. A man approached and asked if he was the one running the theater, which clearly stunned and alarmed Ju. He was left standing in front of the theater in a state of mild amazement, trying to figure out the reason for the stranger's appearance in such a remote location. The man greeted Director Ju, asked if he was the one who ran this theater, and then thought, why would a person of his level come here? The man was from the famous NK company, one of the biggest entertainment companies, representing Korea's top actors, and he was responsible for casting actors for major successful dramas. Although he wasn't an actor himself, his name was well known to the public due to the success of the projects he was involved in. The man clearly introduced himself to Director Ju that his name was Choi Jae-min, and he was a director at NK. Director Ju, visibly nervous, asked what someone of his level could possibly want from a place like this. Choi Jae-min simply replied that he enjoyed last night's performance. He clarified that he was referring to the new guy, Young-woo, who played in the recent production. When he asked if Young-woo belonged to the theater, Director Ju confirmed that although he wasn't an official employee, he did work there. Choi Jae-min made a direct and clear offer to Director Ju, apologizing for his sudden appearance. He frankly said that he was extremely excited and that this was the first time in a long time that he had decided to act so urgently. Reflecting on seeing Jun-woo on stage, he described the feeling as finding a true treasure. Director Ju cautiously asked if he was going to seriously involve Jung-woo in some project, to which Choi Jae-min replied with a confident smile that it wasn't just a casting call. Choi Jae-min explained that it's usually very difficult to find really talented young actors for big projects, but Director Ju replied that Jun-woo wasn't just a smart kid playing well. He was able to express the emotions of a man in his 30s without any difficulty. He added that, in truth, Jun-woo had already surpassed that level. Choi Jae-min was surprised and expressed his admiration, saying that he could never imagine someone with such talent hiding in a place like this. Director Ju mentally confirmed that Jun-woo's abilities were far from ordinary. Choi Jae-min then asked if they had clear plans for Young-woo's future. He was surprised when Director Ju smiled and replied that while he respected NK's professional standards, wanted to know if they were willing to offer basic training, major opportunities both at home and abroad to Young-woo. Director Ju added that he also wants Jun-woo to have the opportunity to attend major art events. Choi Jae-min asked, slightly dumbfounded, if Director Ju was serious about requesting all this for a young rookie with no experience. Director Ju smiled confidently and said that if he had actually seen Jun-woo play, he would understand the reason for these requests. After a moment of thought and hesitation, Choi Jae-min finally replied that he would try his best to fulfill these requests as much as possible, but Director Ju thought to himself, looking at Choi Jae-min, that he had not yet realized the full measure of Young-woo's talent. Ju said that what he saw was only half of what was hiding inside. Choi Jae-min handed Director Ju his business card and made it clear that their goal was simply to create an environment for this child to grow up in. At the end of the meeting, Choi Jae-min told Director Ju that he hoped he would choose a path that would be helpful and effective for Jung-woo. He then left the theater, asking Director Ju to think it over well and call him back later. The scene had changed. Now Jung-woo was lying on the floor of the rehearsal room, exhausted and thinking deeply about what he could do for the director. He started to get lost in thought, telling himself that he didn't have any money right now. But then he realized that Director Ju was not the kind of person who cared about money in the first place. As he lay there, immersed in his thoughts, he suddenly heard the door swing open. Director Ju watched him from the doorway for a while and muttered to himself that he was bored. He tried to get Junwoo's attention by entering and intentionally coughing. Director Ju stepped inside and kindly said that he just wanted to check if he was all right and see if he had any questions, especially since he had a great teacher under his belt. And then saw that Gigi had questions after all. Jungwoo pointed to a book he was reading and said that some of the translated dictionary definitions didn't quite match the examples given. Director Ju enthusiastically sat down next to him and confidently stated that although he only had 5 years of experience, he had studied the equivalent of 10. He looked at the text and said excitedly, could it really be the moment when he could help? When Junwoo pointed out the section he was having trouble with, Director Ju stared at the text in bewilderment, trying to figure out what language it was originally written in. He stood up suddenly, pretending to have a stomachache, much to the surprise of the protagonist. He quickly left the room and awkwardly told Jungwoo that he had a stomachache and to keep reading. He slammed the door behind him and stood outside, breathing heavily from stress, thinking with amazement, how much longer will Junwoo continue to surprise him? At that time, Ju felt that he finally got the image he had dreamed of, but was amazed at how fast Junwoo was developing. Standing outside, Director Ju said to himself with deep sadness that he had experienced many failures in his life, but this was the first time he felt so incompetent. He realized that it was becoming truly difficult for him to control or guide such a gifted young man. After a moment, Director Ju returned to the room and saw Junwoo holding out a book to him, humbly asking for an explanation. Director Ju sighed with relief and joy, because at least he knew this part well. Director Ju excitedly began to explain to Junwoo the fourth wall theory about the invisible wall separating the audience from the stage. He continued by saying that Brett's actors sometimes broke the fourth wall and addressed the audience directly. Ju added that theater was not just a form of entertainment, but also a way to convey social messages. Junwoo nodded, confirming that he understood, then pointed to another section. Director Ju turned to that part and said that it was no longer so complicated. The scene changed and we scrambled back to the study. The books slammed onto the desk with a great clatter. Immersing himself in the books, Ju realized the great responsibility he now had to help Junwoo. Director Ju held a book on understanding theater in his hands, feeling nostalgic and wondering if he was reading it again at his age. Sitting in his office and enthusiastically taking notes, he wondered if he had ever felt such passion for learning since he first entered the world of theater. But that passion didn't last him long. Director Ju began to feel overwhelmed after noticing how quickly Junwoo was developing. At some point, Ju realized that Junwoo had already outgrown the stage of learning theory and surpassed the professional level of performing. He walked into the room and noticed that Jungwoo waited until all the staff had left, then began to prepare an empty stage, repeating his lines flawlessly. At this time, Jungwoo focused on the smallest details, from character expressions and habits to movement patterns and even lighting angles, changing depending on the nature of the scene, making Director Ju feel like he was watching real art. He also noticed that Jungwoo performed by keeping only the emotional core of the characters and rewriting the rest of the dialogue on his own. While Director Ju was watching Jungwoo perform on stage, he remembered NK's manager's business card and thought that this might be the best way for Jungwoo. He called NK's director and said that he wanted to leave everything behind and meet face to face. The scene changed to a small restaurant, with Director Ju sitting there with GH drinking coffee, while Jungwoo was enthusiastically enjoying his food. At this moment, Director Ju began to feel very hesitant and anxious, not knowing what he should do next. He remembered the call in which the NK representative assured him that he had made the right decision, promising to fulfill every condition that Ju asked for, and even said he was willing to discuss any additional requests from Jungwoo. The caller explained that they could arrange a visit the next day and expressed his desire to see Jungwoo perform right away, but the caller assured him that he shouldn't feel pressured, emphasizing that this was just an opportunity for Jungwoo to perform on stage. The caller confidently stated that given the exceptional circumstances, a contract was practically guaranteed. But Director Ju himself began to have doubts, wondering if Jungwoo would accept the offer so easily based on his previous behavior. Indeed, when Director Ju later asked Jungwoo if he wanted to go to Seoul, Jungwoo coldly replied that he would rather spend his time reading. which made Director Ju think to himself that he expected that answer. At the same restaurant, Jung-woo noticed that Director Ju wasn't eating and asked if he wanted to give his food to him so he could eat it himself. Director Ju felt awkward about how much attention he was paying to Jung-woo and wondered why he had become so careful with this boy. Director Ju then gently asked Jung-woo if he had ever been to Seoul, and Jung-woo simply replied that he hadn't. Director Ju was shocked and asked if he had ever traveled anywhere. Jung-woo confirmed that he had never traveled. Director Ju reacted sharply, wondering aloud how someone his age had never traveled once in his life. But he quickly pulled himself together, realizing that he had strayed off topic. He calmly asked Jung-woo if he had even heard of the famous Building 63 in Seoul, explaining that he would be amazed when he saw it. Director Ju began to describe Building 63 with great enthusiasm, gesturing with his hands, explaining that it was a 63-story building. Meanwhile, Jung-woo very calmly responded to this excitement with simple words, "Impressive," continuing to eat his food. A strange silence briefly fell between them as they sat silently in the restaurant. Ju said that he had to go to Seoul the next day for a short trip, and suggested that Jung-woo go together and see the city. He continued trying to convince Jung-woo by describing the famous Myeongdong neighborhood in Seoul, saying it was different from what he was used to seeing in the countryside, and asked if he had heard of it before. Jung-woo didn't answer a word. He just continued eating in silence. Director Ju felt a slight uneasiness because of Jung-woo's silence, but suddenly, Jun-woo asked in a direct and unexpected tone, did Director Ju really want to get rid of him so badly? This surprised Ju, who hastily said that he just wanted Jun-woo to enjoy his trip to Seoul. However, Jung-woo bluntly stated that he was disappointed. He then sarcastically asked where that enthusiasm had been before, which visibly tensed Director Ju and made him stare at him in confusion. Director Ju began to feel deeply anxious, wondering if Jun-woo already knew what had happened. He continued to worry, thinking perhaps Jun-woo had overheard his conversation or contacted NK himself. He regretfully realized that he should have told Jun-woo about it first before taking any action. At that moment, Jung-woo stunned him by directly asking him if they would go to Seoul the next day. Director Ju, clearly flustered, asked in surprise if this meant that Jung-woo agreed to go, to which Jung-woo simply said yes. Director Ju asked if Gigi had a place he wanted to visit. He said no. The man wondered if Jung-woo thought he was inviting him for the sake of professional training, but reassured himself that that wasn't the case at all. He said that he fully understands the importance of NK Entertainment, which is much more than what Jun-woo could have imagined. The man then said that while he may not know Jun-woo's personal circumstances, the company could help him in the future. He explained that Jung-woo needed to meet people of his level, because no matter how well he performs, there are only amateur actors in this place. Director Ju continued that it would be better if other actors didn't ruin Jung-woo's stage. Jung-woo then asked again about the specific place they were going to, prompting Director Ju to carefully explain that it was the headquarters of NK Entertainment. Jung-woo suddenly agreed to Director Ju's suggestion, which surprised the director, and made him wonder why Jung-woo seemed so obedient, especially since it wasn't like him at all. He asked again, with uncertainty, if Jung-woo was really sure he wanted to go, but Jung-woo remained silent without giving an answer. When they arrived in Seoul, Director Ju was deeply impressed by the large and modern appearance of the company building, marveling at its grandeur. He began to comment enthusiastically about the modern studios he had previously seen on TV. Jung-woo watched in silence as the director marveled at what he saw. An employee of the company gently told Director Ju that he was acting like someone from the countryside. Finally, the employee informed them that they had arrived at the appointed place and asked Director Ju to wait outside for a while. Director Ju took a deep breath, trying to calm down, and then enthusiastically said that they would be right in. Director Ju walked to the door and gingerly took hold of the handle, clearly hesitating and feeling slightly anxious. At this moment, Jun-woo surprised him by asking if they were entering together, which confused Director Ju a bit. Director Ju quickly retracted his hand and awkwardly replied that he was just trying to open the door for him. Director Ju then turned to Jun-woo and gave him a loud cheer, and Gigi said that he would try his best. When he entered the room, Jung-woo was greeted with polite and clear words of welcome. Choi Jae-min, who was sitting inside, continued smiling. "We've been waiting for you." Choi gently gestured for Jung-woo to sit directly across from him. At this moment, Jung-woo inwardly realized that this person was Choi Jae-min from NK Entertainment. Jung-woo then turned around to see the person sitting next to Choi, and was greatly surprised when he recognized who it was. That person turned out to be NK Entertainment's famous star actor, Gil Junho. When Young-woo entered the room, Jaemin greeted him again and asked him to take a seat first. Young-woo quietly sat down across from them, preparing to talk. Sitting next to Jaemin was star actor Gil Junho, considered one of NK Entertainment's most prominent talents. These events actually took place before Gil Junho became a big star, but even then he was very popular among movie buffs. At that time, Gil Junho was active in a prominent supporting role, but never appeared in such places. Young-woo immediately realized that Gil Junho's presence here was no coincidence. He had been brought here intentionally. Gil Junho watched Young-woo for a second while Choi Jaemin directly asked his name. Young-woo calmly replied that he didn't have a name yet and that he was going to choose one. Choi Jaemin was slightly surprised by the answer and wondered to himself if Young-woo was going to choose a stage name. He noted with certainty that Young-woo didn't seem nervous at all, which made him wonder if Young-woo even knew who he really was. But after a pause, he suggested that maybe Young-woo hadn't heard of him because he lives in such a remote place. Choi Jaemin started the conversation seriously, saying that they could gradually get to know each other, and told Junwoo that he had already seen his performance and was very impressed. He then asked how long Young-woo had been doing theater, and Young-woo simply replied that the performance was 2 weeks ago. Choi Jaemin was surprised at the answer and clarified when was the first time. Gigi said that it was, which made Choi Jaemin wonder with shock if he heard correctly. Choi Jaemin's surprise increased when he actually realized that the guy had only started playing 2 weeks ago. At that moment, Choi Jaemin pulled out a new script called Miraculous Dimension, saying that their company was planning a new movie. Young-woo held the script in his hands and quietly repeated the title, Miraculous Dimension. He remembered that he had seen this movie in his past life. It was a story about a body transmigration between a high school student and a 40-year-old teacher. Before discussing the details, Choi Jaemin asked Young-woo to show a short snippet of his acting. Young-woo hesitated for a moment, looking at the script in his hands. Then he already looked at the slightly ajar door. Meanwhile, director Ju tried to listen from behind the door, but he couldn't hear anything. Choi Jaemin asked Junwoo to start reading from page 34 of the script. Gil Junho was surprised by Young-woo's manner, because it was drastically different from what he was used to seeing from aspiring actors. He remembered that most of the ambitious actors he had met recently had given him excessive respect and actually begged him to watch them play. But unlike them, Young-woo seemed incredibly calm, without much interest or impatience. Choi Jaemin thought to himself that the former him would never have let someone like that stay in the room, or indeed in the industry. Yet he continued to watch Junwoo with intense curiosity, thinking to himself, just how good is this boy? Junwoo quietly began reading the script as the first scene unfolded in a school hallway filled with students. Tae-kyung, the character played by Young-woo, stood in the middle of the hallway, looking around in confusion, trying to figure out what was happening to him while the camera followed his puzzled expression. Tae-kyung was clearly confused and anxious, thinking to himself, why am I here? And why does his voice sound like this? He's changed a lot. In the room, Choi smiled softly and told Jung-woo that it wasn't that hard, and asked if he wanted to try it. Jung-woo was silent for a long time, staring intently at the script in his hands. He sat quietly in his chair, continuing to stare at the script as if trying to make a key decision. Complete silence reigned in the empty room for a few seconds, as the sunlight streamed through the window. Suddenly, Young-woo put the script on the table and said firmly that he couldn't do it here. Choi Jaemin was confused and asked if there was a problem or something wrong. Young-woo clearly replied that he couldn't say the lines correctly in this setting. Choi Jaemin slightly irritatedly asked if that meant that the room itself was preventing him from acting well. He then assured Young-woo that actors usually rehearse in quiet places like this, and that all you need to do is fully immerse yourself in the character. But Jung-woo interrupted him, explaining that it wasn't about immersion in the character, but about the lines themselves. Young-woo calmly began to explain that there were many sounds missing from the script, such as the noise of skateboards, the laughter and chatter of the students, the sound of the students being active, and the sound of the wind coming through the windows. He then continued by pointing to the script on the table, saying that these sounds intertwined with the lines are missing here, and that's what's missing. Choi Jaemin was puzzled by his words, and thought to himself why the background sounds would have such a big significance during the lines. Meanwhile, Gil Junho, who had been silently and quietly listening to the conversation, was clearly interested. listening intently to what Young-woo was saying. Suddenly, Gil Junho stood up abruptly and shouted Young-woo's name, which surprised Choi Jae-min. Gil Junho picked up a script from the table with obvious interest, flipping through it, which made Choi Jae-min anxiously ask, "What's going on?" Gil Junho focused even more deeply on the script, his eyes expressing surprise and intense concentration. Choi Jae-min observed Gil Junho's unusual behavior and thought that he had never seen him like this before. Then he suddenly remembered Director Ju's words about the importance of providing thorough training and major professional opportunities. Choi Jae-min turned to Junwoo, trying to reassure him, saying that even if he thought this setting was not ideal, could he still try to act out the scene? Youngwoo was surprised by Choi Jae-min's words and whispered to himself, wondering, "Is this an audition?" Then he suddenly realized what Choi Jae-min was getting at. He asked, "Does he need to perform sitting down?" Youngwoo thought for a moment, considering that this scene needed someone else, a partner. At that moment, Gil Junho sat down, still holding the script in his hands, and a slight, focused smile appeared on his face. He remembered a ceremony from his past when the announcer had enthusiastically announced the winner, Mr. Gil Junho, at the ceremony. He also remembered another scene where Gil Junho had cried in the movie, sat under the setting sun with a soft smile, thinking that he wanted to be just a little bit happier every day. Now in the office, Junwoo sat thoughtfully and quietly said to himself that this could turn out to be really fun. Youngwoo then looked at Choi Jae-min and quietly asked if he had another copy of the script. Choi Jae-min asked why he needed one. Youngwoo calmly and confidently replied that the scene was better performed in collaboration with someone rather than alone. And with calm confidence, Youngwoo added that Mr. Gil Junho should be the one to collaborate. Jae-min was amazed and surprised by Junwoo's bold and unexpected suggestion. The guy grinned and began to look for reasons for this behavior. He then thought to himself in bewilderment that perhaps Junwoo's youth gave him such boldness and confidence. Jae-min tried to gently explain the difficulty of the request, but Gil Junho interrupted him with a warm smile, saying that he agreed with the proposal. Jae-min was stunned by Gil's response and exclaimed in disbelief. He looked at Gil Junho, anxiously wondering if the latter really intended to play with this boy right here and now. He then asked himself in confusion what exactly Gil Junho saw in this young man that he was so excited to work with him. Meanwhile, Youngwoo sat quietly and calmly, waiting to see what would happen next. The scene changes and here's Gil Junho looking furious and tense, yelling about what's going on here. He looked at Youngwoo and shouted at him with furious energy, demanding that he stop just standing there idly. Jae-min watched the scene with great admiration, thinking to himself that Gil did not disappoint. His voice alone perfectly conveyed the emotions of a 40-year-old man trapped in a young body. Gil continued to play the role with depth and sensuality, and Jae-min clearly felt the gravity of the feelings he was conveying. Then it was Youngwoo's turn, and he began to speak with obvious passion and anger, shouting that he too was deeply disappointed in everything that was happening. Gil responded with sadness and confusion, saying that his teacher had gotten younger. Gil began to complain about his clothes, criticizing Youngwoo's sense of style, which made Youngwoo angrily exclaim. Gil then fell silent for a moment, only to hear Youngwoo seriously ask, did he realize what was going on? At that moment, Gil noticed something strange. He caught a faint change in Youngwoo's voice that matched that of a middle school student. He was stunned, and wondered if Junwoo had grabbed the image so quickly after hearing only 2 lines of lines. Gil continued his part with strong emotional intensity, angrily asking why Youngwoo was blaming him, saying it wasn't his fault. Youngwoo continued with irritation, warning Gil not to do anything rash with his body and to calm down. At this moment, Gil noticed Junwoo's finger trembling slightly, which impressed him even more. Youngwoo continued speaking with a firm tone, once again warning Gil not to do anything. Jae-min watched the scene with great interest, noticing Youngwoo's subtle gestures, the direction of his gaze, and small movements. Gil realized to himself what a wonderful skill Junwoo had, thinking that he had talent. At the end of the scene, Junwoo blurted out in despair and emotional exhaustion that he didn't know anything either, and that all this was driving him crazy. Jungwoo responded more convincingly, diving deeper into the character and precisely controlling the character's emotions. At that moment, Gil froze in place, staring intently at Youngwoo, as if trying to unravel the mystery of what makes him so unique. Gil then recognized for himself that he could no longer tell who was leading and who was supporting in their scene. and realized that if Young-woo chose to perform more vividly, his own entire performance might be overshadowed. Not long later, Jun-woo stood up, looking over the script in his hands. He quietly thought that there was something missing in the dialogue. Jun-woo smiled softly and told Gil that he would soon give him the signal to return to the stage. Calmly, Young-woo told Gil that he would stop at this point. Meanwhile, Gil watched him, quietly wondering where this young man came from and what he had been doing up to this point. The two of them stood in the room in complete silence, not moving or saying another word. Finally, Jun-woo spoke with a quiet smile, telling Gil that playing with him was a completely different feeling than playing alone on stage. Gil was surprised by Jun-woo's words and quietly thought in bewilderment. Inside, Gil was deeply touched and thought to himself that he was the one who should be thanking GG. He then sadly thought about how happy he would be if he could really work with this young man. Jun-woo gave a genuine, bright smile and assured Gil that he too had enjoyed the experience very much. At that moment, Gil stood in front of Young-woo and confessed that he could never forget that day. Suddenly, Jaemin intervened, clearly surprised and excited, saying that the performance had exceeded his expectations. He added with amazement that he was genuinely amazed at what he'd seen. Gil smiled, clearly referring to Jun-woo, saying that now that he had seen the performance, it was time to move on to the details of the contract. He then directly addressed Young-woo with a smile and asked if he had changed the second line on purpose. Young-woo calmly and confidently replied that he had indeed changed the dialogue a bit. To this, Gil quietly explained that if it was a real scene in front of the camera, his actions and movements would have been different too. Jung-woo then seriously explained that he had adjusted his facial expression to fit the current scene. Jung-woo then explained that he had adapted his face to the setting, while Choi Jae-min looked a little confused. Jung-woo quietly turned to Gil and asked with genuine interest if he had ever practiced stage acting. Outside, Director Ju stood looking somewhat surprised as he listened to what was going on inside. But he was stunned when he entered the room and found Gil sitting there waiting. He remembered that he had only recently been able to hear part of the performance and their conversation. However, he had never expected that the stage partner in the training would be Gil Junho himself, and he was glad about it. But Director Ju froze in confusion for a moment, wondering at the strange expression on Gil's face. Then it suddenly occurred to him that Gil's discomfort might be related to the way this young man was behaving. Finally, Gil Junho spoke up, addressing Director Ju and asking if Director Ju really ran the theater. The director confirmed that he did indeed own a theater in the middle of nowhere. Gil Junho then asked what productions were planned. When Gil Junho started talking to Director Ju, the director asked, "Why is he asking this?" Gil Junho smiled calmly and explained that he was just wondering if he could perform on his stage. At that moment, Director Ju was deeply shocked in secret, amazed at the thought that such a major actor could perform in his theater. Director Ju then cautiously began to discuss terms with Gil, explaining that he didn't have enough money for his salary. Gil Junho responded with a calm and confident smile, assuring that money was not a problem for him at all. He then clearly and enthusiastically stated that he was just curious and deeply interested in performing in this theater. Director Ju was again inwardly surprised, perplexed as to what exactly Gil meant by repeating this thought in his head. He then asked Gil if they had already made arrangements with the boy, to which Gil quickly confirmed that he had just finished talking to him. But Gil Junho interrupted him and calmly asked if the boy was only working in his theater, expressing his surprise at the boy's talent and saying that it was hard to believe that Young-woo only belonged to a small local troupe. Gil quickly apologized after noticing Director Ju's awkwardness, assuring him that he hadn't meant to offend him. Director Ju admitted that he understood the sentiment perfectly and had once felt the same way himself. Ju clarified that he doesn't really know everything about Young-woo's life, since he enjoys solitude by reading books and theater scripts. He also admitted that he can't be sure what exactly Young-woo is internalizing from these books. Gil Junho was extremely surprised by Director Ju's words and began to ponder in amazement. He remembered the moment when he himself had reacted with strong emotion to the thought that everything Jun-woo knew about acting was completely self-taught. Director Ju smiled when he saw Gil's reaction and calmly, confidently stated that it was just natural talent. At that moment, Gil Junho looked at Director Ju and calmly stated that he was sincerely looking forward to working with him. Director Ju smiled with great relief and extended his hand for a handshake, and Gil smiled in return and extended his hand as well. Gil looked at director Ju and said that he sincerely looked forward to working with him. Somewhere else, Youngwoo stood alone in a wide hall in front of a large screen with various scenes flickering on it, and watched them with focused attention and complete calmness. The screen showed many pictures, including a historical scene with two people talking, a schoolboy looking extremely frightened, a touching moment of a small child petting his dog, a woman praying in tears, and finally, a scene of a massive explosion that sent a car flying into a man. Junwoo remained motionless, standing silently in place. His eyes were staring intently at the large screen in front of him. He began to recall the performance with Gil Junho, replaying his behavior in his mind. Youngwoo stood still, showing no obvious reaction. Meanwhile, Choi Jaemin walked over to Youngwoo and called out his name, causing Youngwoo to turn to him with slight surprise. Choi Jaemin smiled warmly, looking at Gigi with a friendly look, and asked, what did he think of his proposal? He continued talking, trying to convince Youngwoo by saying that once again, he might not get such a chance. Youngwoo was silent for a while, looking thoughtfully into the man's eyes. At that moment, the man looked dejected and apologized very politely. Choi Jaemin then went on to say sadly that this was the first time he had felt so deeply disappointed. Still, he reached out to Youngwoo, handing him his business card and asked him to contact him if he needed help. And that was the end of the scene at NK's company. The hero thanked him and left. The scene changed, and here we can already see the theater building. In the theater, director Ju was busy using a metal wrench to tighten the nuts, wondering aloud to himself if it was really over. He was surprised that Gigi and Gil Junho would be appearing together in a production on his stage. At that moment, Youngwoo entered the theater, and director Ju noticed his early appearance, wondering why he had come so early in the morning. Youngwoo pointed to the other workers and asked why director Ju himself was doing these things. Director Ju smiled, waved his hand, and told Youngwoo to get on with his practice, since he himself was dealing with other matters. But he quickly recovered, and clearly told him to rest, gain strength, or go somewhere to have some fun. Director Ju stopped working and turned to Junwoo with a slight smile. Then, lightly tapping on the staircase railing, he asked Youngwoo how was he. Junwoo was a little surprised by the principal's words and only said in surprise, "Wow." Director Ju said that he noticed Gigi's effort and decided to keep up. Youngwoo then asked if all these changes were made specifically for the upcoming performance. The director confirmed that he had indeed tweaked it a bit. Youngwoo felt slightly surprised, thinking that the director not only admired him, but had actually studied theater for a long time and had been running this place for a long time. Junwoo inwardly wondered how high the director's expectations were for the upcoming performance. Finally, Youngwoo smiled and said that the theater looks much better now than before, and as he left, he added that he would make a few more adjustments later. But director Ju looked slightly hesitant. A question popped into his mind. He turned to Youngwoo and said that he wanted to know something. Youngwoo calmly asked what exactly it was that piqued his curiosity. Director Ju replied that he didn't understand. Why did he say no to NK if he wanted to perform with Gil? Junwoo silently looked at director Ju without giving an obvious answer to that question. Ju said that they probably have a lot more scripts out there written by popular writers, and he could act in a lot of them. He then said that he never understood it, and this time he was especially interested to know the reasons for the rejection. But Junwoo remained silent for a while, just quietly looking at director Ju. After a pause, Youngwoo said very calmly that he didn't remember exactly why he had rejected the offer. Director Ju was surprised by the answer and tried to make a joke about how Jun obviously did it because of him. But Junwoo didn't respond and just continued walking away, inviting director Ju to have breakfast together. The principal was surprised and didn't realize. Was the kid serious now? Outside, Junwoo very calmly said he would order kimchi stew and asked director Ju what he would like to eat, while director Ju was very surprised. Later, quiet sounds were heard coming from the rehearsal room, and the principal quietly approached the door to look inside and find out what was going on. Director Ju began to wonder with deep confusion whether Gil was really passionate about the theater or if he was interested in something else entirely. Gil Junho continued to carefully jot down notes while listening to Youngwoo's thoughts on the script. Director Ju thought to himself that he didn't believe Gil would come for even one day of preparation at all. He began to think back to that morning when he walked into the theater, yawning through his mouth and saying good morning to everyone. Gil Junho rented a place near the theater to rehearse the play every day, and came to the theater even earlier than director Ju himself. Shortly after director Ju arrived, Gil Jun-ho greeted him and quickly went out to talk on the phone. At that moment, Director Ju thought to himself that Gil Jun-ho seemed more interested in working with the new talent than the theater. Director Ju silently watched Gil Jun-ho and thoughtfully asked himself why this man hadn't left yet. Jun-woo stood next to Director Ju and said that he himself didn't know why. Ju was confused. Soon Gil Jun-ho sat down on the couch and became visibly nervous, which caused Director Ju to ask Jun-woo in surprise if Gil Jun-ho always acted like this. Woo asked what exactly was wrong, and Director Ju clarified that he was talking about the tense and irritated expression on his face during rehearsal. Young-woo calmly replied that it only happens sometimes, and Director Ju thought to himself that he expected to see Gil Jun-ho more angry. Gil Jun-ho befriended Young-woo, holding the script in his hands, ready to continue the discussion. Young-woo sighed, preparing to re-enter the discussion with Gil Jun-ho, who seemed very raring and excited to continue. After a while, Young-woo told Gil Jun-ho that there was no point in continuing this discussion because he had his own vision. Gil Jun-ho looked seriously at Young-woo, who told him very clearly that he should find his own way, on his own. At that moment, Gil Jun-ho suddenly felt a wave of surprise and portrayed it. Outside, Director Ju continued to watch their scene from afar and began to feel that something different was happening this time. The days were passing and the date of the expected theater performance was approaching. There was only a week left before its showing, and the preparations were finally coming to their final stages. Yet, despite all this, there was still one unresolved problem. The problem concerned the character of the fugitive Paul, whose role had not yet been assigned. Director Ju sat in his office, deep in thought, muttering to himself, anxiously pondering the problem. At the same time, the theater's website proudly reported the participation of star Gil Jun-ho in the production, and the reviews were positive. Some in the comments expressed bewilderment, wondering how Gil Jun-ho, who is known as an outstanding actor, would be able to do the same. Gil Jun-ho, who was famous for only starring with big directors, agreed to perform in such a small theater. Director Ju also wondered if he should consider it his good fortune. Although Gil Jun-ho's participation attracted a lot of attention, the underlying problem remained in the shadows and was not publicized. People began to notice and point out that the role of the fugitive Paul confronting Inspector Anton had not yet been assigned. Just a week before the premiere, Director Jue was extremely concerned about the possibility of presenting the play without announcing another lead actor beforehand. Immersed in thought, he suddenly noticed a light on and the door opened late at night, which surprised him. Who could be awake at this hour? When Director Ju opened the door, he was completely stunned by what he saw, even whispered in wonder if this was really his theater. Jun-woo was sitting quietly in the theater, having rebuilt and rearranged it so beautifully that Director Ju barely recognized the place. Jung-woo was surprised to ask what Director Ju was doing here so early in the morning, and the director hesitantly walked down the steps of the theater toward him. Jun-woo calmly turned to him and asked him with a soft smile if he liked this place. Director Ju was surprised at the question and replied with obvious excitement. How could he not admire such a beautiful transformation? Wondering again if this was really his theater. Although the theater was small, it now resembled an artistic palace thanks to the decoration and lighting created by Jun-woo. It was clear that he hadn't studied directing for nothing. Director Ju was amazed at Jung-woo's ability to create such an extraordinary atmosphere without expensive equipment. Jung-woo simply explained that he was only continuing the changes that Director Ju himself had started. Director Jue was shocked by the words of Jung-woo, who confirmed that he had been watching him the whole time. He felt great joy in imagining how the theater would look like during a performance with these innovations. When Jun-woo wiped his forehead with a tired movement, Director Ju suddenly froze, completely amazed by the beauty of Jung-woo, which was revealed when he flipped his hair off his face. Director Ju wondered in amazement if Jung-woo had always been so beautiful, which made Jung-woo himself slightly embarrassed and uncomfortable at the unexpected question. When Director Ju asked why he always hid his handsome face, Jung-woo replied that he hid it because of his past work. Director Ju was deeply moved by looking at Jung-woo, thinking how this guy still hides so many secrets behind his calm appearance. Director Jue felt that Jung-woo had already experienced a lot and had done his best to reach this level of skill. Meanwhile, Jun-woo thought to himself that this performance would be quite different from the previous performance, which only had about 20 people attending. He expected that there would be rumors about him one way or another because of this. But no matter what, Junwoo didn't feel the slightest bit uncomfortable or anxious about the situation. Jun recognized to himself that it was too late to backtrack on his decisions. He remembered how Director Ju had clearly stated that he would take responsibility for whatever happened next, no matter what it was. At that moment, Junwoo thought to himself calmly, "It's still a second life." But then Director Ju gently asked him if he was completely sure of his decision, and Junwoo replied with a soft, confident smile that he was fine, and it wouldn't cause him any trouble. Director Ju remained amazed, pondering to himself how Youngwoo always manages to read his mind. Afterward, Director Ju tried to calm himself down by saying that if Youngwoo insisted, they could completely hide his identity. But Director Ju immediately regretted what he said, dismissing the idea as ridiculous, calling it impossible. However, Youngwoo simply replied that it didn't matter anymore. Director Ju tried to justify his concerns again, saying that it might get on the news and video interviews with Jungwoo would start spreading. Jungwoo replied that he's quite aware of what could happen, but he doesn't care. Jungwoo then looked at him calmly and confidently said that he'd rather do it than die. Director Ju was shocked and deeply affected by Jungwoo's words. Junwoo smiled softly and said that it was time to start already. The guy said that he would be very disappointed if it all went to waste. Junwoo and Director Ju stood together in the center of the stage, quietly taking in the atmosphere of the space in quiet silence. The director had already thought of what he should do next. Director Ju gently told him not to worry about anything and only focus on the stage. He would take care of everything. Director Ju assured him with full confidence that he would make sure that nothing in this play would cause Junwoo any trouble. Jungwoo silently looked at Director Ju and gave him a slight smile. The scene switched to the street around the theater. News began to spread on the internet. People were curious about the new actor playing the lead role next to Gil Jun-ho. Some speculated that he might be the new trainee from NK Company. Then the official promo image of the show was released, confirming Jungwoo's participation as the fugitive Paul. The audience began to gather outside the theater, overflowing with excitement and anticipation. Backstage, when Director Ju looked at the stage, he saw that the audience was very excited. The audience in the audience began to discuss animatedly how such a small theater was able to attract a famous actor like Gil Jun-ho to participate in the production. Meanwhile, Director Ju watched nervously from backstage, listening to the audience's enthusiastic conversations. The audience began gesticulating and discussing Gil Jun-ho's return after a long absence, which made him both anxious and delighted. He remembered how surprised he was to watch Gil Jun-ho rehearse, whom he was used to seeing only in this role. He noticed the reactions of the audience that clearly confirmed Gil Jun-ho's true fame. Among those seated, some commented on the beautiful stage design. Another girl said that when she entered the theater, she thought she found herself in an abandoned mine because of the elaborate, ominous lighting. Director Ju watched these reactions from afar, smiling silently. In the actor's waiting room, Junwoo stood quietly, intently reviewing his script while the rest of the cast was busy making final preparations. He stood in front of the mirror in complete silence, as if immersed in thought. Junwoo felt a strange sensation he wasn't used to when suddenly Director Ju gently called out to him from behind. He looked a little embarrassed, but then calmly asked if Youngwoo was ready to go on stage. Youngwoo turned to him again and replied with quiet confidence that he was completely ready. The play began under the title The Chase Across the Border, and the plot revolved around Inspector Anton, who 10 years ago had lost his family and one leg due to someone else's actions, which entailed a ruthless chase through time. The image of the fugitive Paul, played by Youngwoo, was unwittingly drawn into these events. Gil Jun-ho perfectly embodied Inspector Anton, conveying the depth of his anger, while Youngwoo brilliantly embodied the role of Paul, clearly showing the character's suffering and the injustice he faced. A tense chase between the two characters unfolded on stage as each tried to outwit the other in a complex story. The description to the poster stated that this was a complex play where the audience would not be able to easily distinguish reality from illusion. That's when a character came on stage, tapping his cane on the floor. Gil Jun-ho stood on stage as Inspector Anton, firmly expressing his desire to put an end to this decade-long story once and for all. The audience listened to Gil Jun-ho's voice with great admiration. One audience member tried to capture Gil Jun-ho's presence on stage, despite the ban on taking pictures. Director Ju, watching from backstage, was amazed by Gil Jun-ho's performance, and wondered if he was always this amazing. Gil Jun-ho stood on stage delivering a powerful monologue, attracting the deep attention and admiration of both the audience and Director Ju. When the monologue was over, Director Ju said to himself in admiration that a true professional actor really stands out from the rest, confirming to himself that this level of acting is what keeps the audience coming back to the theater. But suddenly, a loud and mysterious voice came from the stage, saying that it was the one who made him a monster, which shocked everyone. Jun-woo appeared on stage with a cold and completely different expression, portraying a grown man who had been involved in murders for many years. Director Ju, watching, deeply doubted whether such a role was really suitable for a young boy. Nevertheless, Young-woo calmly raised his head with great confidence, turned to Inspector Anton with a mysterious look, and asked if what he had done was really right, immediately attracting all eyes. From the beginning of the dialogue, no one in the audience saw Young-woo as a 17-year-old boy anymore. The audience, along with the director and the crew, felt the tension, to the point of holding their breath, and couldn't take their eyes off Young-woo for a second. At the peak of the scene, Gil Jun-ho reappeared and shouted sharply, strongly at Young-woo that he could hide the evidence, but he couldn't hide himself. Gil Jun-ho stepped forward toward Young-woo, shouting that he couldn't help himself now, and that it was time for him to stop playing innocent, causing Young-woo to visibly retreat. Jung-woo cried out in obvious pain, screaming that he wasn't, grabbing his head with both hands in wild desperation, trying to defend himself, which left the audience in deep suspense. At that moment, Young-woo smiled with a cold and calm expression, once again stating in an ominous and mysterious tone that he was indeed the wrong person, and that he was tired of repeating the same phrase. The audience watched the scene with awestruck amazement. One audience member could only squeeze out the single word "wow" with pure admiration. On stage, Young-woo and Gil Jun-ho continued to perform with such intensity and conviction that everyone in the theater, including Director Ju backstage, felt a chill with every word that Young-woo spoke. Jung-woo's presence was so overbearing that the audience was completely oblivious to Gil Jun-ho's presence despite his equally powerful performance. And it wasn't just the audience, even the backstage crew, NK company representatives, and Gil Jun-ho's own manager watched Young-woo's performance with complete admiration. Young-woo stood on the stage with a crazy and psychologically unstable smile, while everyone watching was in a state of complete shock. Finally, the curtain fell, signaling the end of the performance, while the audience remained seated, completely amazed and astonished by Young-woo's extraordinary performance. The audience continued to applaud enthusiastically after the end of the performance, standing up from their seats in admiration. Meanwhile, Gil Jun-ho sat next to Young-woo backstage, clearly showing deep emotion and admiration for what Young-woo had shown on stage. At that moment, Gil Jun-ho remembered how he had always felt immense pride in his acting skills, but now, for the first time, he felt ashamed of himself, ashamed of his pride and all the recognition after seeing Gigi's acting. In the audience, some women started talking about Young-woo, asking his name and who he was. Gil Jun-ho remained seated, watching these reactions, and clearly realized that all eyes in the audience were solely focused on Young-woo. It was then that Gil Jun-ho felt that everything had changed for him, that this was the moment when he truly realized where the world's attention was directed. The scene is changing, and now the news of the revival of the main theater is being discussed. The top of the community posts are real-time comments. Gil Jun-ho's absence is noted. A headline in the news feed about a rising monster star among the cast. The new theater legend is called Incomparable, surpassing Gil Jun-ho himself. The scene changes and Guy hastily warns that the meat is burning on the grill. Ju asks about the result of the final performance. Another man praises the manager for a great job, to which he modestly rebuffs. Gil rebukes the director for skipping the party, considering it impolite. In response, he questions the politeness of canceling the shoot at the last minute. Ju finally turns his attention to the main character. The guy looks at the meat and wonders if it's possible that it's unpalatable. He is very sad, but suddenly his phone rings in his pocket. Some kind of work call. The man exclaims in despair that even with an urgent matter, it is too late to call. The actor picks up the phone call. He calmly confirms his understanding of the conversation, promises to look into the matter, and call his contact back later. Ju asks, with obvious skepticism, if an idol can be identified by dancing alone. The man is surprised to note that some people excel in theater without having any experience watching plays. The stranger turns to Ju. The boy shows up late to the party. He politely apologizes, explaining that he was warned about the event, but didn't expect to be so late. Ju asks, who is he and what is he doing here? The stranger introduces himself. He calls himself Yu Sang-jun, and clarifies that he works for W Broadcasting, and talks about how he has a good offer for Ju. He looks up at the budding genius actor in the building. Ju seems shocked by what he hears. He immediately understands what this stranger needs. Ju rebukes his interlocutor for bothering him on an important matter at such an inappropriately late hour. The man tries to calm the interlocutor by offering to explain the situation. He mentions the development of a new program of incredibly large scale. Continuing the explanation, he emphasizes the extraordinary enormity of the project. It is stated that this scale has never been seen by most people before. The scene changes and we are back in some neighborhood of tall buildings. We see a door of some kind, and behind it sits a serious-looking man with papers in his hands. He's staring at them and studying the information. The logo for a new show called Actors Kingdom has been unveiled. The advertisement says that this show will be like a large-scale reality show to find talented actors from Korea and abroad. The terms of participation in the show have no restrictions on the age, gender, nationality, or previous acting experience of the candidates. The show is open to anyone who loves acting. A pre-selection is held before airing, and those who pass compete live on air. The key principle of the project is that the participants are evaluated solely on the basis of their acting skills, without other criteria. The program is built on the tournament principle. The main prize goes to one winner who will make it through all the tough competition. The program offers a huge cash prize and a role in a film by a top Korean director. These conditions look very impressive for the participants. However, the man notes that all the benefits described exist only superficially. He cynically speculates about the overabundance of aspiring actors. He thinks it is only fun when untalented contestants show up. He hears his work phone ringing and picks it up. The man introduces himself as Park Jung-gil during the phone call, but suddenly his eyes widen. The interlocutor respectfully addresses the chairman. He confidently asks not to be disturbed, promising full control over the situation of the project. The man brags about the experience of creating similar shows. He frankly compares the upcoming reality with the usual staged drama on the methods of work. The guy confidently declares a predetermined winner. He explicitly promises to ensure the victory of the interlocutor's son by any available means. The man affirms the willingness to manipulate the montage. He emphatically asks for complete trust, guaranteeing no problems with the outcome of the show. He hung up the phone and was relieved. He exhaled loudly. His eyes began to bounce around the room looking for something. The call came from Chairman Kang Gong of the Daemyeon conglomerate. As the head of a group with annual revenues in the tens of trillions of won, a project budget of over 200 billion won was announced. Most of the funds were raised from investors. The chairman's son, Kang Hyuk, was mentioned separately. The man directly states that the chairman's son is the main reason for the creation of this program. The interlocutor frankly admits that the project is a production to create a star out of the sun. He is confident of the ease of realization of this plan. The importance of controlling the viewer's attention is emphasized. Early pressure can lead to suspicion of predetermined outcomes. It takes a contestant to attract interest, followed by a quick disqualification. The standard reasons for disqualification are too primitive. Suddenly, an employee enters the office with materials. He addresses the team leader, informing him of the documents brought in for review. The team leader reviews the materials. He asks about the availability of prospective candidates, noting the formulaic nature of most of the questionnaires. Someone ironically notes the perfect match. Another man clarifies if something broke at this fortunate moment. Jun-woo's questionnaire appears in front of the man's eyes. The basic details are listed: name, age, address, phone number. His full name is highlighted at the top. He heard the news about the revival of the main theater. There are many forum posts, including comments about Jung-woo and Gil Jun-ho. A man recognizes the guy from the scandalous news. A colleague confirms that Jung-woo is now famous in theater circles after the story. Tim Lid asks about a performance recording. Busy with work, he waves off watching the video and demands a brief oral retelling. The employee agrees. He mentions the information gathered about the candidate, alluding to the unusual circumstances of his background. The facts are voiced. A guy from the province, honest, without family and money. Abandoned his studies for an acting career without support. Daily visits the main theater, driven by a passion for the stage. Established a close relationship with theater representative Ju Man-sik. Rumor has it that Jung-woo treats the director like a father. This informal relationship is of interest to observers. Witnesses report his attempt to make his way through the competition. The guy approached the NK company to get a chance to perform. Park speculates about the guy's courage in getting Gil Jun-ho to cede the stage. The interlocutor surprisingly interjects about the details of what happened. The man criticizes modern beauties who believe in easy success without proper effort. The idea of spectatorial discernment is voiced. The sincere passion of a provincial guy seems capable of touching the hearts of the audience of the show. The description of the scenario continues. The naive guy faces the harsh reality and suffers defeat from the capital's favorites of the project. It is hoped that his story will ignite a spark in the hearts of the viewers. Even a brief emotional response from the audience is considered valuable for ratings. The man is confident in the effectiveness of emotional promotion. He interrupts the report, ordering an urgent meeting with the candidate. Someone looks at the documents with surprise. His question expresses an unexpected discovery or arose doubt in the data presented. The boy's talent is recognized, but it's emphasized that it's not commensurate with Kang Hyuk's. His training at the Juilliard School of New York is mentioned. More on Kang Hyuk's superiority is a wealth of stage experience, including work with Broadway and Hollywood stars. The guy is capable of attracting attention, but is on a whole different skill level. His potential is recognized as limited. The man abruptly interrupts a coworker. He considers the question naive and requires a professional approach without silly clarifications. Someone recalls the guy's looks and influence. Any agency is ready to fight for him, and spending $200 billion is unreasonable. A boss gives an ultimatum to a subordinate. The deal has to be finalized today, or else it's not worth coming back to the office. The scene switches again to Ju's conversation with the kid. The employee interjects about the decision about Young-woo to include the kid in the show. The man addresses CEO Ju. He emphasizes the exclusivity of the upcoming casting, setting it apart from the usual projects. The conversation continues. The magnitude of the attention is emphasized. The entire project will be closely monitored by the entire country. A direct question to CEO Ju is sounded. The interlocutor recalls his own strong desire to see Young-woo succeed in his career. The speech is interrupted mid-phrase. Joe realizes that he is being provoked. Rumors are voiced about the intention to use Young-woo for hype. The speaker is not afraid of exploitation, but something is bothering him. The risk is mentioned. If the public sees the real skill of the guy, all the plans of competitors will collapse. The only worry goes unvoiced. Ju clarifies the list of people present, then singles out Young-woo as a special participant in the casting conversation. The man asks for a list of approved contestants for the show. He insists on explaining the terms of the contract, making the interlocutor uncomfortable. The interlocutor avoids specifics. He refers to the incompleteness of the negotiations, refusing to discuss the details of the casting. The guy realized that he clearly underestimated Ju's competence. He is surprised by the deep knowledge of the theater director in television subtleties. The main problem is voiced. Participation in the production would not cause any questions, but the specifics of the show create risks. The peculiarity of the show is explained. The focus would be on idols with an army of fans or interns at major agencies. A hypothetical scenario is considered, if the show airs even one scene with Young-woo playing. Disastrous consequences are predicted when talent is showcased, but the editing team is in control of the airing. Concerns are voiced that the producers will intentionally hide Young-woo's talent with editing. This will devalue the whole project and its intentions. The conversation is interrupted by the word, nevertheless. A unique chance is emphasized. The whole country will see Young-woo play live. This is the main trump card of the proposal. Joe realizes that it's a very good offer in that respect. A key question arises. Will the guy himself agree to participate? The hesitant tone suggests a negative answer. CEO Ju calls his desire an ambition. He assumes that Young-woo would not be interested in such a show format. The explanation is simple. The guy's approach to acting is fundamentally different. He is far from the standard paths. A contrast is presented. Young-woo, next to the typical pretenders to popularity, looks out of place and strange. Ju still looks at the main character sitting in the building and realizes that this conversation probably won't work for him anyway. The manager apologizes for his busyness, indirectly linking it to the guy's business. His posture expresses fatigue. The guy reminisces about the show Actors Kingdom. Its global scope and international resonance is emphasized. A rumor is voiced about a possible winner. It will be the son of a very rich and influential family. Joe approaches the restaurant through the entrance. June asks the director about that office boy's send-off. The director is surprised at the covert surveillance of himself. Gigi notes that the guy took a lot of unnecessary trouble. The guy apologizes for the inconvenience. The principal grumpily agrees but is secretly pleased with his role. Joe interjects about the motives behind the question. He assumes that the decision has already been made and discussion is pointless. Continuing the dialogue, the manager clarifies about the guy's possible interest. His tone expresses genuine curiosity. Director Ju notes the uniqueness of the situation. This is the first time the guy himself has shown interest and attention, even though he had previously ignored it. A breakthrough in this dialogue, the guy suddenly declares his desire to participate in the project. His decision sounds firm and final. The manager reacts with obvious bewilderment. He interrogates about the suddenness of such a decision, not hiding his surprise. The guy explains the motive as simple curiosity. He wants to see if the situation has changed since past times. The manager interjects, doubting the seriousness of his intentions. Guy's direct question takes him by surprise. Does Ju really want to stop him? The manager spreads his hands. He admits that he won't interfere with the decision if the guy really wants to participate. The guy clarifies the size of the prize pool. The manager remembers about the 100 million, but doesn't understand the reason for the question. An unexpected proposal. The guy wants to give the winnings to the director. He sincerely does not understand the motive for such generosity. The explanation is simple. The guy knows about the difficulties in preparing the play. He wants to compensate the manager for the hassle. An extension of the thought is that the cramped space was not suitable for the audience. The guy recognizes the magnitude of the problem solved by the manager. Guy recognizes the underlying tension during the preparation. He tried not to show the difficulties, but realized the magnitude of them. The manager ironically remarks on the impossibility of growth in this theater. Guy's level requires a move to a prestigious place. He sighs, recognizing the validity of the words. The manager calls the guy insufferable, but warns of the producer's dirty tricks. The prognosis is grim. No footage of the guy playing may ever air. The editing crew is in complete control of the show. Jung-woo lets the manager not overstretch himself. He doesn't care about the level of support in this risky project. The manager is puzzled and asks about motives. He clarifies if the guy really wants to win or if it's an experiment. And now GH remembers his former everyday life. When he used to watch a lot of TV, he remembered the actors everyone knew and respected for being on TV, and about how it was his little dream of an ordinary man. He came back to the present and smiled softly. Guy attributes the participation to a simple interest in the process. The manager notes his unusually serious attitude toward the project. The manager questions the compatibility of fun with fierce competition. He recalls the dirty methods of promotion in the show. Such a format seems to the manager alien to the guy. He allows spectacularity only at an equal level of participants. The importance of a level playing field is emphasized. The manager allows breaking the rules of the show if they interfere with self-actualization. He is not intimidated by the dirty tricks of the producers. Open casting allows participation without artificial restrictions. The guy directly asks about the plan to use him. The manager reacts with genuine surprise at the question. The manager's possible benefit is clarified. He resents the calculated framing of the question, denying self-interest. The guy insists that there is no ulterior motive. The manager reluctantly confirms the lack of personal interest. After a brief hesitation, a decision is made. The guy agrees to be the decoy in the producer's scenario. The manager is against the role of a pawn, but the guy is confident in his abilities as a provocateur and is ready to use this skill. The director is surprised. How is he good at this? And Junwoo turned around on the spot. He turned back and asked Ju, does it matter how he starts? The important thing is to take the first step. The scene changes to a huge teasy advertising a new show. People pay attention to it. The logo of the show, Actors Kingdom, A Star is Born, was along with the three main actors. Participants are crowding at the entrance to the pre-casting. The staff asks not to create a crush and directs the flow of people in the right direction. Someone instructs the guy before the performance. The advice sounds clear, to play as he memorized the text, without improvisation. The man sighs, seeing his colleague's nervousness. He tries to calm him down, gently advising him to remain calm. Jungwoo stands calmly in the middle of the crowd. The participants are in great excitement. One dreams of making it to the main stage for the TV broadcast, and a friend encourages him. A guy is watching the set. His line states the busy, and business-like atmosphere at the casting call. The explanation of the selection format is improvisation as a way to quickly assess the many candidates in the preliminary stage. The screen shows two key categories for performance: role and situation. This is the basis for improvisation. Participants draw random cards. They are labeled with roles and situations: anger, recognition, success, or failure. Participants are given a task, 1 minute of improvisation based on the keywords that are drawn. Example: fallen artist and recognition. Required to instantly create a character and emotion based on the words received. The ability to quickly build a scene is a key skill to pass. Depth of understanding and acting versatility are assessed. The high difficulty is due to the need for mass screening of participants. Jung-woo walks through the company office, very relaxed and chill. An employee meets a student participant. He points out the direction of travel, helping to orient himself in the room. At a production meeting, the main object of attention is identified. The director singles out a particular young participant for focus. The broadcast is about to begin. A promotion plan is worked out. After the premiere, the PR team will spin the kid's story before Kang Hyuk's debut. The manager introduces Jung-woo to the producers. He politely addresses them, giving the guy's full name for the official introduction. The producer greets Jung-woo warmly. His words express anticipation and familiarity with the background of the young actor's visit. The producer notes the guy's growing fame. He jokingly offers to take his autograph, showing ostentatious friendliness. The rest of the jury is just as curious about the protagonist. Someone invites Jung-woo into the office. A hand gesture indicates the need to go inside the room to talk. The producer tries to relieve the tension. He advises the guy to relax, repeating it several times for persuasiveness. But the GG quickly walks away, taking the arm of this office conductor guy off his shoulder. Jung-woo calmly states his condition. His short rejoinder states the lack of excitement in the current moment. The guy registers an internal dissonance. He notices the discrepancy between the expected and the actual atmosphere of the meeting. The producer in green is looking at our guy from his distant seat. He's looking very closely. The producer notes the mismatch in the image. The guy's appearance doesn't fit the expected role of a naive redneck. His presence exceeds the planned level. A powerful audience reaction to this contrast is predicted. The conductor notices the producer's intense gaze. His scrutinizing manner of observation bewilders his entourage. The monitor shows working materials. The title, Han Jung-woo, Episode 1, tags in Kang Hyuk's name. The conductor starts yelling and asking for the monitor to be turned off quickly. Suddenly, there's a tense silence in the room. No one dares utter a word after something like that. The conductor realizes he's screwed up a bit. The producer confusedly explains the topic of the meeting. His speech is directed at the protagonist. The purpose of the meeting is revealed. Finding a way to showcase the guy's skills. Doubt is sounded about the original information. The image of the country boy does not match the real behavior. The producer explains the rules of the show. Even without talent, you can stay on the air by pleasing the management. The winner is determined by the taste of the bosses. At least ostentatious simplicity was expected. Instead, the guy questions his role in their script with a direct question about the main character. The producer is perplexed by the guy's behavior. He agreed to be a pawn, but now he's acting strange and indecisive, throwing off plans. He is looking for a solution. The atmosphere is suitable, but the image does not meet expectations. Deviation from the plan requires urgent adjustment of tactics. A regret for the soft approach is sounded. Producer considers careful restraint to regain control of the situation. A paradox is noted. Usually, inexperienced participants are more malleable. This case violates all standard casting management schemes. The manager waves goodbye to the inconsistency. He's only pleased with the guy's lack of excitement, which simplifies the filming process. Something's bugging the producer, though. The producer doubts the clarity of the hints. He explicitly says the budget is 20 billion won, trying to impress the guy with the scale of the project. The manager expresses doubts about Jung-woo's abilities. His line contains an unfinished thought about the possible difficulties of the performance. Gigi even yawns from such an empty and boring conversation. Participant number 17, Kim Jin-woo, is announced. He is given the keywords soldier and confession to start the improv. The producer assures him that it's safe to follow their plan. His tone expresses an attempt to remove the guy's remaining doubts. But suddenly, the guy points his finger upward. Jung-woo asks for permission to observe the process. His question interrupts the negotiations about the details of participating in the show. He points his finger in some direction. The producer reminds him of the importance of the current conversation. He expresses annoyance at the guy's sudden loss of attention. The guy demonstrates complete disregard for the topic. His detached response confuses the interlocutors. He criticizes the organizers for idle chatter. The contestant is waiting for the evaluation, and they are discussing extraneous things. The producer irritatedly states the uselessness of words. He agrees to cut to the chase, but his tone remains sharp. The producer voices a prepared legend. Jung-woo used to go to Jew theater every day out of passion for acting, but the director kicked him out. Dramatic details are added. The guy's desperation, his plea, give one chance. A continuation of the fictional story. Jung-woo's persistence saved the theater from bankruptcy. His talent was unexpectedly revealed at a critical moment. The guy calmly refutes the lies. He points out that director Ju never kicked him out, contrary to the producer's story. An awkward silence reigns. The producer tries to salvage the situation by insisting that the truth is not necessary, but the story is necessary for airing. Guy reminds him of the acting casting format. The producer parries. Viewers need stories, not just skills. Jung-woo declares the purpose of participation, only acting. Everyone around him was shocked. The green producer looked at Gigi strangely at all, but Jung-woo was confident in his words and looked him straight in the eye. Gigi exploded and said that the producer was telling him not to act, but to become a fraud again and cheat people.